At a fitness center in Gangnam, Kang Hyuk is doing an online live stream where he is trying to film a mukbang. Kang Hyuk is completely obsessed with working out, and there is an important reason why he became like this. In the past, he suffered such serious injuries that it would have been difficult for him to even walk properly if he had not started building up his muscles. He received those heavy injuries during a special forces mission. Because of that, he started doing physical therapy and regularly visited a chiropractor to recover his body. After some time, he slowly began trying many different kinds of exercise, including yoga, Pilates, and anything else people said was good for health and recovery. Eventually, Kang Hyuk became known as the nation's best fitness trainer. However, the reason he is now doing online mukbang streams is because of the worldwide pandemic disaster that affected the entire world. Soon after that, Kang Hyuk began streaming online to earn money and support his gyms, but the profits he made were nowhere close to enough. On top of that, all the stress caused him to start suffering from hair loss and baldness. The doctor warned him that if he did not reduce his stress and worries, he would soon lose all of his hair completely. Because of this, Kang Hyuk becomes extremely worried, since he believes that if he becomes bald, he will end up suffering through everything alone. Kang Hyuk scrolls through his phone while thinking about how much he loved reading Muram novels when he was younger. Ever since he was a child, he always enjoyed borrowing Muram novels from the small bookstore near the corner of his neighborhood. While looking through an app, Kang Hyuk suddenly discovers a brand new series that is about a Shaolin monk. The moment he reads the title, he becomes shocked and starts thinking that the series looks incredibly good. It even gives him the strange feeling that he has somehow gone back to the happy days of his childhood again. However, only a few moments later, a strong feeling of sleepiness suddenly hits him, causing him to collapse unconscious onto the floor. When he finally wakes up again, he immediately notices a bald Shaolin boy standing nearby, and the boy himself looks shocked after seeing that Kang Hyuk is awake. Kang Hyuk becomes confused and wonders why this strange child is inside his house and who shaved the boy's head like that. The young Shaolin boy then points out that Kang Hyuk is not only older than him but also much bigger in size. While looking around carefully, Kang Hyuk slowly realizes that the place around him is no longer his house at all, and to his shock, he has somehow turned into a Shaolin boy himself. Soon after that, he remembers that the boy had called him Kang Hyuk earlier, which is also the name of the protagonist from the manhwa he was planning to read. Because of this, Kang Hyuk suddenly becomes excited and convinces himself that everything happening around him must only be a dream, so he decides to enjoy the strange situation while it lasts. However, the moment he arrives at the training ground, the monk instructor immediately scolds him harshly for arriving late. The monk teacher then tells everyone to get into position as they are going to start with a horse stance. Kang Hyuk wonders if the monk is referring to squats. He then looks around the other kids who are training, and gets surprised thinking his knees will be a goner if he trains like that. As Kang Hyuk went through rehabilitation training, he started to do proper exercises. He knew just how important lower body and core exercises were more than anyone else. There were times when he saw trainers who taught wrong exercises and focused on upper body exercises. Kang Hyuk then thinks that the kids need to straighten their backs and naturally lean forward. The monk then tells everyone that they aren't able to use their lower body to maintain their balance. He also says that they won't be able to exert their strength properly in any punching or staff techniques. However, Kang Hyuk is worried for the kids as he is a kind of a man who can't just allow others to exercise with the wrong posture. He then gets furious and shouts at others for training wrongly. The monk then asks him why he is shouting for no reason in the middle of training. Kang Hyuk then wonders if it's because this is a martial arts novel that he can sense energy from their shouts. The monk questions Kang Hyuk, wanting to know if he is suggesting that the entire Shaolin training system is somehow wrong or flawed. Kang Hyuk explains to the monk that if the disciples keep practicing using the same methods they currently follow, they will end up hurting their knees and going through a lot of pain because of it. The monk is not convinced by this at all and instead sees Kang Hyuk's concern as nothing more than a weak excuse coming from someone who simply does not have what it takes to handle such tough training. Kang Hyuk keeps pushing back against the monk's thinking for quite a while, doing his best to understand the reasoning behind and ask serious questions about the specific training methods that the Shaolin Temple has been using for so long. As their conversation goes on, Kang Hyuk learns that the monk genuinely believes it is completely fine, and even necessary, for young disciples to risk hurting their knees during training, since going through that kind of physical pain is meant to build up their mental strength and sense of discipline. Kang Hyuk strongly disagrees with this way of thinking and gets more and more frustrated as he continues listening to what the monk has to say. Unable to hold back his frustration any longer, he ends up directly challenging one of the most well-known and respected disciples at the Shaolin Temple, which causes that disciple to get visibly angry and let out a loud and powerful shout in response. After that, an older Shaolin master walks over to Kang Hyuk. He explains that Shaolin martial arts are not just for fighting, but are meant to help and protect ordinary people. He adds that they also use their skills to defend people from evil threats and dangers. The old master then worries that Kang Hyuk's attitude might influence the younger disciples in a negative way if he stays like this. Since they cannot simply punish a young boy, the master instead tells Kang Hyuk to prove whether the Shaolin training methods are wrong or not through action. He then asks Gung to step forward as the opponent who will face Kang Hyuk. The monk announces that Kang Hyuk will be given 7 days to prepare and train before the spar with Gung takes place. The following day, Kang Hyuk continues working through his own training routine while the rest of the Shaolin disciples carry on with their usual training that puts a lot of strain and pressure on their knees. Kang Hyuk, who has already been training hard for about 2 hours since early in the morning, is feeling worn out and is ready to get the food and nutrition his body needs to recover. At this point, he has no idea that a frustrating problem is just around the corner waiting for him. When the meal finally comes, Kang Hyuk quickly realizes that everything on the table is made up of only vegetables, and that the people at Shaolin are all strictly vegetarians who do not eat any meat at all. Kang Hyuk is so caught off guard by this that he wonders out loud why he can smell food that reminds him of something from a dream, not yet fully accepting the reality of what is in front of him. He then completely loses his cool and turns to the monk in a panic, demanding to know why they are only being served vegetables after spending the entire day training so hard and pushing their bodies to the limit. The monk gets angry at Kang Hyuk's outburst and starts walking toward him with the clear intention of putting him in his place and teaching him a lesson about respect. Kang Hyuk, not backing down at all, gets ready to give the monk a firm and direct response right back. Just at that moment, the hall leader Hyunmun steps in and makes his presence known, as he is the one responsible for overseeing and taking care of all the meals at Shaolin. The hall leader calmly turns to Kang Hyuk and lets him know that if the amount of food in front of him is not enough to fill him up, he is more than welcome to go ahead and take more. Kang Hyuk then asks him if he has protein supplements like chicken breasts that surprises everyone. One of the boys then asks Kang Hyuk why he has been acting strange since earlier. Suddenly, he starts feeling strange and thinks that something is wrong with his body. He further thinks that when he exercises, he gets tired and he can smell the food. He tells them that he thinks he acted strangely because he was way too hungry and that he did not mean what he said. He then asks for mushrooms and beans to eat. After that, Kang Hyuk heads back to his class and sits down to study, thinking to himself that he cannot believe they are already going over Buddhist scriptures so soon after breakfast and early morning training. He also thinks about how he has already drawn a lot of attention to himself and now feels like he really needs to win the upcoming spar so that others will recognize and accept his training method as valid. Meanwhile, the hall leader and the monk are having their own conversation about Kang Hyuk's upcoming fight with each other. The hall leader shares that from what he has heard, Gung is the most capable and skilled disciple out of all the new disciples they have taken in this year. At the Shaolin Temple, they bring in hundreds of new disciples every single year to train and learn. Out of all those disciples, there are always some who end up leaving and dropping out because they simply cannot handle the intensity and difficulty of the harsh training that Shaolin demands from them. 7 days later, Kang Hyuk is finally standing across from his opponent Gung and the fight is about to begin. In a flashback that goes back to those 7 days of preparation, one of the Shaolin boys walks up to Kang Hyuk and asks him what he is doing. Kang Hyuk tells him that he is doing stretching, but the boy has no idea what that means or what it involves. So Kang Hyuk explains it in a way that makes more sense to him, telling the boy that it is a tendon extension technique. Kang Hyuk then invites the boy to give it a try himself, and when the boy does, Kang Hyuk is genuinely caught off guard because the boy picks it up surprisingly fast and with very little trouble. Back in the present, the monk watches what is happening and thinks to himself that it is starting to look like Kang Hyuk was not just making excuses to get out of training after all. He also thinks that even though Kang Hyuk completely ignored their instructions and went his own way, it is becoming clear that he has still been putting in real work and training on his own terms. As it turns out, Kang Hyuk has spent that time repeatedly striking a tree over and over again, which he considers to be the key method that will allow him to take Gung down in a single instant. Kang Hyuk then casually begins stretching right in front of Gung before the fight and tells the monk to go ahead and get the match started already. The match kicks off with Kang Hyuk rushing straight at Gung, and as Gung throws a punch at him, Kang Hyuk quickly grabs onto his leg instead. In that same moment, Kang Hyuk thinks to himself that he cannot just go ahead and use modern martial arts techniques on someone who is essentially still a child, especially since the moves he has learned and trained in up to this point are serious enough to kill a person if something goes wrong. However, in his current situation, the technique suited to use on him would be one that even children around the age of Mu Jin can endure. Kang Hyuk manages to take the guy down to the ground and within just 1 second, he has him completely subdued and unable to move. Seeing this happen so fast, all the Shaolin boys who are watching get furious and start to worry, unable to believe that Mu Gung has been taken down that quickly and easily. Gung himself is on the ground struggling and completely confused, with no idea what Kang Hyuk is doing to him or how he ended up in this position so fast. Once the second-class disciples manage to calm themselves down and regain their composure, they start throwing out all kinds of unhelpful and ridiculous advice to Gung from the sidelines, though deep down they already know by that point that the situation is not looking good for him. Even though none of them have ever heard of or seen an armbar before, they have all been training in martial arts for at least 10 years, and that experience alone is more than enough for them to immediately understand just how much pain that position is putting on his arm. Kang Hyuk grips his arm tightly and warns him that if he tries to resist or struggle against the hold, his arm is going to break. He then follows up by telling Gung clearly that if he tries to push any more strength into it, the bone in his arm will come right out of its socket. Then out of nowhere, Gung suddenly bursts into tears and starts crying like a little child, which completely catches everyone watching off guard and leaves them stunned. With that, the winner of the fight is decided and it is Kang Hyuk. After that, the story explains the chain punch, which is one of the techniques from the 8 extremities fist. It mainly uses the fists, elbows, and shoulders as weapons during close combat. Because of this, it lets someone defeat an opponent very quickly at short range, and it is known for being very strong. Among all the young Shaolin monks, Gung is the one who has mastered the chain punch the most. However, earlier that morning, his powerful punch gets completely beaten in a pathetic way. Because of that, Gung becomes furious at Kang Hyuk and says that he used some strange technique instead of the real chain punch during their fight. Soon, the other Shaolin monks also point out that sparring inside Shaolin means fighters are supposed to use Shaolin martial arts, which means Kang Hyuk has broken the rules. After hearing this, the monks ask Kang Hyuk why he did not use the chain punch during the duel. Kang Hyuk calmly explains that if he had used the chain punch, the fight would have dragged on for a very long time. He says that if that happened, both of them could have ended up badly injured, so he simply focused on the real purpose of a duel, which is taking down the opponent as fast as possible. Deep down, all of the Shaolin monks already know that Gung, who is supposed to be the best among the young monks, gets easily defeated by the new kid using a strange technique that none of them has ever seen before. One of them thinks to himself that at this rate, people on the outside might start losing faith in and doubting the strength of Shaolin's martial arts, or even worse, all of the new disciples might decide to pack up and leave Shaolin entirely because of what they just witnessed. However, to everyone's surprise, the head monk is actually standing there with a smile on his face as he turns to Kang Hyuk and asks him whether he used that particular technique specifically so that he could take Gung down without causing him any real harm in the process. Kang Hyuk confirms that is exactly what he did, and upon hearing that, the head monk tells him that by doing so, he stayed true to and honored the very essence and spirit of what Shaolin stands for, and declares him the winner of the match. The head monk goes even further and tells Kang Hyuk that he will personally take it upon himself to show him the true and real power of Shaolin, a power that is capable of bringing down even the most evil and dangerous demonic forces. The monks then move quickly and bring out a large boulder and set it in place, which immediately catches Kang Hyuk off guard as he thinks to himself that the head monk is seriously about to smash that thing apart with nothing but his bare fist. Using just one hand, the head monk comes down on the boulder and completely destroys it in one shot, sending all the kids into an excited frenzy at the incredible display of raw power they just got to witness right in front of their eyes. It turns out, martial arts is like something in which just one impact is enough to break open a mountain, and one swing of the sword can bring down hundreds of enemies. Kang Hyuk then says that the head monk himself said that it's to overpower the enemy without harming them, but he broke the boulder to pieces. Once again, the entire training ground goes into silence. At the same time, the news gets to Hyun Sung, who is in charge of education and Hai Yung's master, that Gung lost. The monk tells Hyun Sung that Kang Hyuk might be a spy, but Hyun Sung thinks that there is no need for him to do something so eye-catching if he's a spy. Hyun Sung also says that there is nothing to be worried about since Kang Hyuk is a new disciple and they will observe him over time and find out if he's just unique or a spy. Hyun Sung wonders if Kang Hyuk might be from a martial arts family since he came up with those strange training exercises by himself, and those might be what he learned in his family. Hyun Sung also says that a greatest figure in a child's life is his father, and he just wants to prove that his father's teachings are better than Shaolin's, which has been around for more than a millennium. That night, a couple of Shaolin boys finds a guy training late night and gets scared. The guy's nickname turns out to be Mad Dog, and one of them says that he's going to be in the Arhut Hall starting tomorrow. The other boys get surprised to hear that since there are rumors that he might be master of the discipline court, so it's strange that he is going somewhere else. The Mad Dog's real name is Biob Gang, who is pretty influential, has always drilled his juniors ever since they were third-class disciples and maintained the discipline of Shaolin. Biob Gang has spent far more time training than any regular person ever would, and after pushing through endless sessions with very little rest in between, his knees have gone through an absolutely brutal and punishing amount of strain over the years. Without the use of his internal energy to keep things in check, he would be dealing with so much pain that even something as simple as walking would be a serious struggle for him. Even though his knees are in terrible shape and badly worn down, he does not let it bother him at all, because in his mind, basic training is meant to work on both the body and the mind at the same time. He believes that the pain that comes from training is simply another piece of the process of strengthening and shaping his mental fortitude. The next day, Biob Gang gathers everyone together and announces that starting now, he will be training alongside all of them and working together with them going forward. Kang Hyuk looks around the room and is immediately surprised by what he sees, noticing that every single person around him looks extremely tense and stiff, as if they are all on edge just from Biob Gang's presence alone. Not long after, Biob Gang begins pushing everyone to train hard and give everything they have, and as he looks around, he notices that Kang Hyuk is standing with his legs spread out noticeably wider than the width of his shoulders, which is not how the others are standing. That difference in stance immediately catches Biob Gang's attention and causes him to start thinking seriously about stepping in and teaching Kang Hyuk a lesson about doing things the right way. Kang Hyuk tells Biob Gang that his posture is actually wrong and asks if he is just trying to copy what he is doing. After that, Kang Hyuk shows him a different kind of stretch by moving his body in another way. He explains that if they do this warm-up before the real exercise, the body will move more smoothly and softly during training. Kang Hyuk then teaches him a few more stretching movements, and surprisingly, Biob Gang starts to feel a sense of relief in his body. As it turns out, Biob Gang had been relentlessly pushing and hunting down the second-class disciples without giving them a single moment of rest ever since they first joined the Shaolin Temple. All of them know just how intense, obsessive, and completely over-the-top Biob Gang can be when it comes to training, so seeing that very same Biob Gang now acting friendly and relaxed around someone is something none of them expected to ever witness. And yet there he is, actually exercising right alongside Kang Hyuk, who is taking it upon himself to walk Biob Gang through a whole range of different stretching movements one by one. Kang Hyuk explains to him that he should start by bending his knees slightly and then slowly lower himself down into a sitting position, and that as he is doing so, he needs to be very careful to avoid putting any pressure or strength through his knees at all during the movement. Instead, all of the effort and strength should be coming entirely from his thighs and his cheeks as he goes through the motion. When Biob Gang actually tries out the exercises the way Kang Hyuk described, he is genuinely caught off guard and surprised to find that he is feeling noticeably less pain than he normally would during this kind of movement. Every single one of the Shaolin monks standing around them, including Hai Young, is left completely stunned and bewildered at the sight of the two of them getting along so well and bonding with each other like this. Hai Young in particular finds the whole situation so confusing and headache-inducing that he makes the decision to simply turn his attention away from the two of them and ignore whatever is going on between them for the time being. Before wrapping things up, Kang Hyuk tells Biob Gang to make sure he applies and practices everything he just taught him whenever he is working on his lower body training from now on. Although Biob Gang looked like he was bewitched as he followed Kang Hyuk's instructions, he didn't just follow them blindly. He simply decided to follow Kang Hyuk's instructions after experiencing Kang Hyuk's training methods for himself. This is what Biob Gang had decided after he received personal training, stretching lessons, and even a massage from a top-class personal trainer. Biob Gang thinks to himself that Kang Hyuk's techniques were truly remarkable and so effective in practice that they do not look like anything that would come from someone who is completely new to all of this. Biob Gang turns to Kang Hyuk and asks him directly whether those techniques were something that was taught to him by his own family, adding that he has heard those particular techniques have been passed down within his family from one generation to the next for a very long time. In that moment, Kang Hyuk quickly realizes that this is actually a perfect opportunity for him to go along with the story and tells Biob Gang that he did in fact learn everything from his family. Later when Kang Hyuk heads off to lunch, Haijun walks over and approaches Biob Gang privately, and Biob Gang shares with Haijun that based on everything he has observed and picked up on, Kang Hyuk does not actually come from a martial arts family at all, but rather from a family of physicians and healers instead. During the afternoon training session, Kang Hyuk is too busy being annoyed and frustrated with himself over having to deal with such poor and unsatisfying food to fully focus on anything else. Haijun then steps forward and announces to the group that they will now be moving on to the next form of training, and proceeds to introduce and teach them about the lotus position. Kang Hyuk is far from the only one who is visibly excited about finally getting to this point, and that excitement makes a lot of sense considering that this is actual martial arts they are finally getting to learn after spending so much time going through basic training and repeatedly practicing the form of the chain punch over and over again. However, something about this training is sitting uneasy with Kang Hyuk, because even though what they are doing is essentially a breathing technique, it feels noticeably different from the Shaolin training methods that he has come across and read about in novels before. He starts wondering to himself whether they are ever actually going to teach them the proper chant that goes along with the inner energy cultivation techniques, since that piece seems to be completely missing from what they are doing. 1 hour later, Kang Hyuk has been working his way through all of the various Shaolin training methods they have covered up until this point, and just like always, he has been putting in his best effort this time around as well and doing everything in his power to follow every single instruction he has been given as closely as he can. In his head, Kang Hyuk is holding on to the assumption that all of this is eventually going to lead him to obtaining inner energy, a kind of transcendental and extraordinary power that would make everything he is working toward actually possible. The monk then addresses everyone and explains that the energy cultivation technique they just finished learning is actually a foundational breathing method, one that is specifically designed to help them begin feeling energy moving within themselves and gradually build up and accumulate it inside their bodies over time. Shortly after, each of the second-class disciples is handed a book filled with detailed images mapping out the meridians of the human body. The monk then turns to Kang Hyuk and explains to him that there is absolutely no need for him to go out of his way to sit down and memorize every single one of the main meridians, since with enough practice, he will naturally find himself able to draw on them when the time comes, whether that is during the process of circulating his own energy or in a situation where he needs to use them to bring down an opponent in a fight. That evening, Kang Hyuk makes his way down to the training ground to work through some of the techniques he has been learning, but stops in his tracks when he is caught completely off guard by the sight of Biob Gang already being there. Biob Gang tells him that his knees have stopped hurting the way they used to, and that it is all thanks to the techniques Kang Hyuk showed him, so he has been pushing himself to train even more than before as a result. Kang Hyuk immediately starts to panic when he hears this, because the whole reason he taught him those specific exercises in the first place was so that his knees would have the chance to rest and properly recover, not so that he would use the relief as a reason to train even harder. Kang Hyuk tells him to sit himself down on the ground right away so that he can get to work and properly massage his knees the way they need to be taken care of. As he does this, Kang Hyuk's mind suddenly takes him back to his days in the Special Forces, where his body suffered serious and severe injuries after he pushed himself to grit through training without stopping even though he was already badly hurt. That decision ultimately cost him everything and he was forced to leave and retire from the service for good because of it. He remembers what that period of his life felt like, going through every single day drained of energy and without any real drive left inside him, and looking at Biob Gang sitting there in front of him now. He feels like he is looking at a reflection of his old self from back in those dark days. Kang Hyuk then tells him that if his body is injured, he is the only one who suffers and no one else will take responsibility for it. Biob tells Kang Hyuk that in Shaolin no one abandoned anyone no matter what happens. Kang Hyuk then tells him that he was going back to his room to practice the energy circulation technique that he learned today. Biob wonders if he already should feel the inner energy since his family is from a martial arts background and Kang Hyuk just makes excuses that he hasn't learned it due to some personal reasons. After that, Kang Hyuk works through the breathing techniques together with Biob Gang and actually manages to succeed in feeling energy for the very first time during the session. Biob Gang sits with what just happened and comes to the realization that Monk Ha-young and Hyun Sung were absolutely right when they said that Kang Hyuk would one day become a pillar strong enough to hold up and carry forward the 1,000-year history of Shaolin on his shoulders. By this point, Kang Hyuk has gotten a solid rough grasp on how to go about sensing energy and storing it within himself. He has put so much time and repetition into practicing the breathing technique that it has become stable and natural for him now that he is truly comfortable and familiar with how it works. When Kang Hyuk finally opens his eyes and looks around, he is surprised to find that it is already nighttime and that hours have slipped by without him even noticing. Biob Gang looks at him and shakes his head in disbelief, struggling to wrap his mind around the fact that Kang Hyuk has already reached this level even though this is technically only his first time ever sensing energy. He then tells Kang Hyuk that with where he is right now, he is going to be ready to move on and learn the enlightenment cultivation technique, which serves as one of the foundational cultivation techniques of Shaolin. The next day, the monk calls out and asks anyone who has successfully memorized the meridians and anyone who has managed to sense energy to step forward and make themselves known. When Kang Hyuk steps forward along with the others, he is genuinely surprised to see that there are actually quite a lot of people who have already reached the point of sensing energy on their own. The monk then addresses the group and tells them that everything they just worked through and experienced together is the basics of the Shaolin cultivation technique, and that it also serves as the foundation upon which every single one of their other techniques is built. He then holds up a book and tells them that this particular book covers the enlightenment cultivation technique in full detail. One of Kang Hyuk's friends turns to him and asks how he managed to pick all of that up and learn it in just one single night, and Kang Hyuk breaks it down for him and walks him through some of the basic points to help him understand. After that, Kang Hyuk keeps going on his own and continues memorizing the meridians and the sequences over and over until he has every single part of it locked down perfectly in his head. Even after all of that, he still finds it genuinely hard to believe that he is actually sitting here learning about inner energy for real, the very same thing he used to only ever read about in novels when he was growing up. From that point on, Kang Hyuk's training continues to move along smoothly and without any major issues or setbacks getting in the way of his progress. Then out of nowhere, one of Kang Hyuk's friends suddenly shows up dragging along a strange boy behind him, someone who had joined the Shaolin camp around the same time as Kang Hyuk and had been going through the same training alongside everyone else. Kang Hyuk takes one look at the boy and immediately notices that there are several bruises scattered across different parts of his body, and he finds himself genuinely puzzled and wondering what on earth could have possibly happened to leave the boy in such a rough and beaten-up state. His friend then delivers the answer and tells him that the person responsible for putting those bruises on the boy and roughing him up the way he has been is none other than Gung himself. After that, Kang Hyuk and Gung continue arguing with each other until Gung tries to punch him. Kang Hyuk manages to dodge that easily, and using a twister technique he slams him on the ground and holds his neck tightly. Kang Hyuk tells him that the results will be the same even if they fight 100 times. Kang Hyuk then says that if he tells him why that boy is in that state, he will tell him why he lost. Gung then manages to free himself from Kang Hyuk's trap, who thinks that this is why he has an attitude towards him. He further thinks that Gung is very prideful, yet he lost to some technique that he's never seen before, and now he must be curious about why he lost, and it must bother him a lot. Gung says that the reason that boy got beaten up like that is because he got on the bad side of Mu-tae and the others. Kang Hyuk then asks him about Mu-tae, and he says that he is one of Shaolin's outer sect disciples, the only son of the Seobul escort establishment's owner. He explains that monk Hai-mun was trying to recruit Mu-tae into the main temple, but discovered Mu-kyung's talent when he was there. So, he brought him together with Mu-tae here. However, the real problem at the heart of all of this is that Mu-tae sees Mu-kyung trying to rise up and make something of himself despite being nothing more than the son of a porter, and that alone is enough to make Mu-tae's blood boil. Because of that, he started going after Mu-kyung and making his life miserable, treating him like an eyesore that had no business being anywhere near his level, and the situation is made even worse by the fact that Mu-kyung's father already works under Mu-tae's family, which means Mu-tae feels like he has every right to treat the boy however he pleases. Hearing all of this laid out in front of him makes Kang Hyuk even more furious than he already was, and he turns that anger toward Gung, placing blame on him for not stepping up and looking after his juniors the way he should have been doing all along. Just then, Mu-kyung starts to come back to his senses and regains consciousness, but the moment he opens his eyes and sees Kang Hyuk standing there, fear takes over immediately as he assumes that Kang Hyuk is just another person who has shown up to make things worse for him. Kang Hyuk is quick to set the record straight and makes it clear to Mu-kyung that they are not there to hurt him and that they are not the bad guys in the situation. Kang Hyuk then says that the straightforward thing to do would be to go ahead and report the people who have been bullying him, but Mu-kyung pushes back on that idea right away out of fear that his father will lose his job as a result of him speaking up. Kang Hyuk brushes that concern aside and tells him that the solution is actually simpler than he thinks, because if Mu-kyung manages to become a disciple of the main martial group, then it would not matter how large or powerful the escort establishment Mu-tae's family runs is, since nobody would be able to interfere with or mess with someone who holds the position of a main Shaolin temple disciple. Kang Hyuk then turns to the boy and asks him straight up whether he has no confidence in himself to become a main disciple, and then follows that up by asking whether he is really willing to just sit back and allow his father to keep working under the family of someone who does nothing but bully and walk all over him. He drives the point home even further by reminding him that if he chooses to give up and do nothing, then his father is going to go on working under Mu-tae indefinitely with no end in sight, and hearing all of that finally pushes Mu-kyung to make up his mind and decide that he is going to give it a real try for once in his life. Kang Hyuk then addresses everyone else and makes it clear that they cannot just sit around and let the bullying continue on until Mu-kyung eventually becomes a main disciple, and that the most straightforward thing they can do right now is to go ahead and put Mu-tae in his place first before anything else. 3 days later, Mu-tae is standing around impatiently and desperately waiting for Mu-kyung to show up so that he can get back to pushing him around and making his life miserable all over again. Mu-tae's friends chime in and mention that it has already been 2 full days since the last time they roughed him up, and that they genuinely miss the days when beating him was something they got to do on a daily basis without fail. The friends then bring up to Mu-tae that Gung, who always carries himself around like he is some kind of role model for everyone, is apparently with Mu-kyung and Mu-jin today. Mu-tae's eyes light up at hearing this because he has been looking for an excuse to go after Mu-jin for quite some time now, and this feels like the perfect opportunity dropping right into his lap. Just then, Kang Hyuk and Gung shows up and Mu-tae says that the reason Kang Hyuk is acting so confident right now is because he managed to beat that gorilla Gung. Mu-tae then steps forward and asks Mu-kyung if he wants to hit him. However, Mu-kyung finds himself shaking and trembling where he stands because deep down he genuinely thinks that Mu-tae is someone to be truly afraid of. Mu-tae then makes things worse by telling him that if he actually manages to land a hit on him, something very bad is going to happen to his father as a consequence. The moment those words reach Mu-kyung's ears, Kang Hyuk's words come rushing back to him, the ones where Kang Hyuk told him to think about whether he really wants to spend his life watching his father continue working under someone as worthless and rotten as Mu-tae. With that thought burning in his mind, Mu-kyung stops shaking and launches himself forward, throwing a punch straight at Mu-tae with everything he has. At the same time, one of Mu-tae's friends tries to take a swing at Gung, but Gung reads it coming and blocks it without much trouble at all. Going back to earlier, Kang Hyuk had sat down with Gung and told him directly that the reason he lost to him during their fight was because the chain punch he was using is fast and hits hard, but when it comes down to it, that is really the only thing it has going for it. After that conversation, Kang Hyuk and Gung began practicing together, and at one point Kang Hyuk manages to push him back and put him on the ground, telling him that if his opponent already knows exactly what attack is coming, then there is no way they are going to just stand there and let themselves get hit by it. That means he has to find a way to trick and deceive his opponent first if he wants any of his attacks to actually connect and land the way he intends. Back in the present, Gung manages to get a tight and firm grip on his opponent's hand and announces that he is about to come at him with the first technique of the chain punch. In a flashback, Gung sits with the idea that Kang Hyuk brought up and thinks to himself that he never considered using deception before because in his mind, relying on trickery and misdirection during a fight has always felt like cowardly behavior, but even so he cannot deny that Kang Hyuk has a point and that he is right about it. Gung then turns to Kang Hyuk and warns him that it would be a mistake to look down on Mu-tae and his group just based on how their fight with him went, because that alone does not tell the whole story. Kang Hyuk is confused by this and pushes back, pointing out that Gung himself said he was stronger than all of them put together. Gung follows up by explaining that he was not actually being serious or going all out during their spar, and that if it had been a real fight instead of a sparring session, he would have gone ahead and brought out the martial arts techniques passed down through his own family and would have also made full use of all the inner energy he has built up and accumulated over time. Later on, Gung gathers everyone and brings them out to a secluded and out-of-the-way corner away from everyone else, specifically so he can show them exactly what his family's martial arts look like up close. Gung then launches into his family's martial art technique and the display is so raw and powerful that even Kang Hyuk finds himself taking a step back from the sheer force of it. Kang Hyuk thinks to himself that this is completely different from the times he had seen Gung use the chain punch before, and it is on a whole other level entirely. Kang Hyuk also comes to the realization in that moment that Gung is pretty much a monster in his own right, because with every single kick and punch he throws, the air itself is snapping and cracking from the force behind each move. Back in the present, Kang Hyuk steps up to face Mu-tae and goes in thinking that taking him down is not going to be much of a problem for him at all. When Mu-tae throws a punch, Kang Hyuk easily manages to dodge it thinking that the martial arts they use are chain punches and its movement range is predictable. After that, Kang Hyuk charges straight at Mu-tae and instead of going for his face, he drives the hit directly into his chest with full force. Mu-tae ends up dropping to the ground from the impact, and at that very moment Kang Hyuk follows it up by driving his fist into the ground beside him and cracking it apart completely. Seeing all of that happen right in front of him, Mu-tae breaks down and starts crying, threatening to go and tell his father everything about what just happened. Kang Hyuk looks at him with little sympathy and points out that Mu-tae spent all that time bullying Mu-kyung as badly as he did, and now here he is falling apart and crying that easily the moment things do not go his way, making it seem like Kang Hyuk is the one in the wrong. When Kang Hyuk turns and looks around to check on how things are going elsewhere, he finds that Gung has already been beaten down by his opponent and is on the ground. Then something else catches his eye and genuinely catches him off guard, as Mu-kyung has completely transformed in the heat of the moment and is now going absolutely wild, repeatedly hammering away at his opponent over and over again without any sign of stopping. It is in that moment that Kang Hyuk puts it all together and realizes that it is Mu-kyung who is responsible for turning his opponent's face into a complete mess. As it turns out, Mu-kyung is actually the most unhinged and dangerous villain character in the entire story of the return of the Demon Supreme Manhwa, someone who craves and is drawn to blood more than anyone else in the whole series. The novel that Kang Hyuk loved so much when he was young had mostly faded from his memory as the years went by, but tucked away in a quiet corner of his mind was the illustration of one particular character that he could never quite forget no matter how much time passed. This character was someone who always believed and declared that all humans were inherently evil, and that he would use blood to wash away and cleanse the never-ending cycle of sins that plagued them all, a completely unhinged and terrifying figure known as the Blood Monk. What Kang Hyuk is watching play out right in front of him at this very moment has brought all of that rushing back, reminding him of the madness and the sheer horror that surrounded the character of Kyung-ha as he remembered reading about him in that novel so long ago. Kang Hyuk and his friend then move quickly and manage to hold Mu-kyung back as he breaks down and starts crying uncontrollably. As he does this, Kang Hyuk thinks to himself that Mu-kyung has not become the Blood Monk yet and that in the novel, the Blood Monk only ever showed up as an already broken and crazed individual, with no explanation ever given for how or why he ended up that way in the first place. Just at that moment, Beob Gang comes storming onto the scene with fury written all over his face, demanding that someone tell him exactly what is going on and explain what happened here. Without wasting any time, Kang Hyuk reaches over and pulls off Mu-kyung's shirt and tells Beob Gang to look closely at the state of his body and take in all the bruises covering him from what he has been put through. Beob gets surprised and asks for an explanation, so Kang Hyuk replies that these injuries that he see were inflicted by fellow monks who bullied Mu-kyung for 2 months. They even had called Kyung out to beat him up again today, so he decided to help him out a bit. Gang suddenly raises his voice and starts yelling at Tae and his group, demanding to know whether what Hyuk said is actually true or not. He then turns directly to Kyung and tells him firmly to stop holding back and tell him the honest truth about what happened. Hyuk, seeing the situation unfolding, tries his best to encourage Kyung to come forward and speak up, reminding him that Gang is someone who judges things fairly and without bias. At that moment, Kyung drops down to his knees and breaks down into tears, confirming through his crying that everything Hyuk said was indeed the truth. He slowly begins to open up and recount what he went through and experienced over the past 2 months, but because he is so overwhelmed with emotion, he struggles to get through the details clearly and finds it difficult to put everything into words the way he wants to. Hyuk then turns to face Gang and reminds him of something he once said himself, that the Shaolin Temple would never turn its back on or abandon one of its own disciples no matter what the circumstances happen to be, and that this situation right here is exactly the kind of moment those words were meant for. Just then, Hyun Sung steps into the scene and says that they will be looking into the whole matter thoroughly, but he also makes it clear that he still finds what Kyung did to Tae's face to be completely brutal and hard to overlook. However, before anything more can be said, Hyuk steps forward and takes the full blame onto himself, telling everyone that he was not able to keep his emotions in check the way he should have. Gang explains to Hyuk that this is the place where they practice Buddhist meditation. He tells him that for the next 7 days he must stay there and speak to no one, as part of his punishment. He shows him a cave and says this is where he will complete it. Inside, he must sit upright, face the wall, and meditate without turning away, not even to eat or sleep. Hyuk agrees and enters the cave. Along with his thoughts, Hyuk reflects on the situation. He always believed that the stories he read took place in the same world, but now a character from a completely different story has appeared on his own. He already knew that the return of the demonic master and the fall of the sinister faction happened in the same universe, and that their 2 main characters lived in the same era but rarely crossed paths since they operated in different regions. But in the second half of one of the books, a new monk from New Shaolin appears, and that makes Hyuk realize that his presence here could be affecting other stories entirely. He wonders if he has already caused a butterfly effect. To grow stronger he will need allies, but he only remembers most of them as they were when they were young. More than a decade has passed since he read these stories, and while he remembers the broad strokes, the details are gone. He wonders whether the story of New Shaolin will still unfold the same way if the main characters become friends and everything starts mixing together. He is already involved with Kyung, who is destined to become the Blood Monk. He knows that it is through facing the Blood Monk that the protagonist of the other story achieves enlightenment and becomes stronger. But if the Blood Monk is stopped now, that hero may never reach that turning point. The whole situation feels impossibly tangled, and Hyuk has no idea where to start. Outside, Gang watches him in silence and he notices that the boy has not moved or done anything else since entering the cave, and he finds it hard to believe that a 12-year-old has that kind of focus. Combined with the special techniques Hyuk has already shown, Gang starts to think this boy could be something truly rare. Elsewhere, the headmaster says he failed to uphold his values. The monk takes the blame for not keeping the situation under control. Hyanman shifts the subject and asks what the monk found out. The monk reports that all the novices were questioned and their accounts matched that Kyung was being bullied regularly. This could bring shame to the Shaolin Order and casts a shadow over Arid Hall. arrives, announces himself as a second-generation disciple, and is allowed to enter. Hyun-sung quietly asks Hyanman if he noticed the newcomer's hands. The master confirms he saw them too. One look at Kyung's hands and face was enough to know he was responsible for what was done to a monk. Hyanman says quietly that Hyuk's arrival may have been a blessing, things could have been much worse without him. The 3 men stand in silence for a moment. Gang asks permission to speak and it is granted. He says the real issue is not about who failed whom, as everyone shares some blame. Instead of dwelling on it, they should make sure it never happens again. The headmaster asks if he has something specific in mind. gives his honest opinion, as all of this happened because the children have too much unspent energy. The bullying was only possible because they were not tired enough. The solution is to intensify training until they are too exhausted for anything else. He asks for permission to carry out his plan. Hyanman agrees and leaves the matter to and the monk, as he will be occupied dealing with other issues over the coming days. He also says the 3 guilty children will be punished and that he will personally visit the discipline hall first. returns to the cave and promises the master he will do his best with the children. He looks in and is impressed to find Hyuk has not moved in nearly an hour and a half. He almost steps inside but changes his mind and decides to check on him in the morning. He tells Hyuk to keep meditating while he arranges water and rations. The moment is gone, Hyuk drops to the ground and says that the man is finally gone. 7 years in special forces taught him to sense a person's presence in the mountains. He lies on the cave floor and thinks about his problem as 7 days with no source of protein. He tries to remember the last time he ate meat. The image of fried chicken comes to mind, crispy on the outside, tender inside. He stares at the ceiling and decides there is only one solution. He needs to hunt. Outside, a girl is chasing a white rabbit through the forest. The rabbit bolts toward a rope trap and she watches from the bushes, waiting. Then Kang Hyuk appears out of nowhere and catches the rabbit in midair. He holds it up and announces that he has protein. The girl watches from the vegetation without making a sound. Meanwhile, in Icheon Prefecture not far from Shaolin Temple, a group of Shaolin disciples is moving through the city gathering information. They speak to local residents to get a sense of what has been happening in the area. After some time they arrive at the gates of the CO Merchant Organization, Protectors of Commerce, and are invited inside. Leading the group is Shaolin's head of external affairs. A man rushes to greet them and introduces himself as CO, head of the organization and father of Mute. He tells them it is an honor to receive the Grandmaster of the 5 Unmatched Fists. Mute stands behind the monks, shaking and looking scared. CO walks up and demands to know why his son looks like that. The monk steps forward and speaks to CO, who leads the merchant protectors. He tells him that Mute ended up this way because of his own bad choices. Instead of training his mind and body, he was busy bullying others. CO gets angry and tries to talk back, but the monk keeps going. He says the investigation turned up even more problems. The merchant protectors are not protectors at all. They are basically bandits who take money from regular people. The monk says he cannot believe a group tied to the Shaolin sect would act this way. He tells his disciples to shut the place down and strip those men of their powers. Munyoung Seo fights back and orders his men to stop the monks. He charges in and throws a series of punches, ending with a hard hit to the chest. The monk stands over the fallen men and tells them their powers are gone. He orders them to give back everything they stole from the people. The defeated men look at each other and have no idea what to do. The monk walks over to a nearby group and asks if Jian Bang is there. An older man steps forward and says that is him. He recognizes the monk and says he is from the temple. The monk bows and tells him that the child Mute was bullying is his own son, Mu Kyung. Far away in the forest, Kang Hyuk stops and looks at something on the ground. He finds a trap that looks like someone made it in a hurry. He looks closer and realizes it looks just like the trap he made the day before, except much sloppier. He wonders if someone is copying him and if another person is living out here in these mountains. Then he hears a noise in the bushes and spins around. Through the leaves, he and someone else freeze and stare at each other. A girl suddenly jumps up and takes off running. Kang Hyuk yells that he already saw her. She runs hard and wonders if she lost him, but he catches up and grabs her. They both fall and roll into the bushes. He looks down and realizes he has landed on top of a girl. She quickly says it was not on purpose. He gets up and apologizes too. Later, the girl sits by a fire eating roasted meat. Kang Hyuk says she must have been really hungry since she was also out here trying to catch a rabbit. She asks him if monks are even allowed to eat meat. He shrugs and says it depends, and tells her not to worry about it. He asks her how she ended up out here since this land belongs to the Shaolin Temple. She goes quiet and looks down. In her head, she sees a memory of herself begging her father not to leave. Then another memory comes where she asks why everyone hates her and whether it is her fault that she exists. Kang Hyuk notices the topic is too painful and changes the subject. He asks her to keep it a secret that he snuck out to hunt and ate rabbits. She asks if it is because monks are not supposed to eat meat. He just says he has his reasons. Then he offers to help her get home, which surprises her. He tells her that a shirtless monk with some influence is going to walk by soon, and she should ask him for help. She asks how he knows that. He says he can just feel it. He tells her to wait in front of the cave and the man will come. Sure enough, Biob Gang walks up. The girl goes to him and asks for help. He looks surprised and asks what someone from outside is doing here. She tells him she got separated from her group. He agrees to take her home. But then he stops and gives her a serious look. He points toward the cave and asks if she has seen a small boy anywhere around there. Inside the cave, Kang Hyuk goes stiff but the girl keeps her cool and says she is too scared to go near the cave and has not seen anyone go in or out. Biob Gang decides Kang Hyuk must be deep in meditation and tells himself he will come back later. He invites the girl to walk down the mountain with him and she thanks him. As they walk, he asks her name. She tells him her name is Sayola Ryu. Back in the cave, Kang Hyuk's ear perks up as he listens as once he is sure the man is gone, he relaxes and lies on the ground. Elsewhere, Mu Kyung runs into Biob Gang and asks if he needs anything. Biob Gang tells him he has something important to share and it's something that involves his father. He explains that the CO Trade Merchant Protectors, run by the father of the boy who bullied him, have been shut down. Shaolin found a new position for Mu Kyung's father somewhere else. He tells the boy not to worry about the outside world anymore and to focus on becoming a true disciple. Mu Kyung stares at him with a steady look and promises he will do whatever it takes. By the 4th day, Kang Hyuk's Special Forces survival training is paying off. He has been hunting for food without anyone noticing. He thinks back to the campfire he made for the girl and realizes how careless that was, as anyone could have spotted him. After that he switched to using a different cave nearby so he would leave no traces behind. He cleans up everything when he is done. To avoid smoke giving him away, he roasts the animals buried in a covered clay pit. It is his first real source of protein since arriving at the temple, and it is more than enough. Each morning Kang Hyuk wakes up before the bell and sits in the lotus position facing the wall. Not because he feels like meditating, but because he can sense someone approaching the cave. Beobgang arrives and is impressed to find the boy already awake and deep in meditation. He wonders if Kang Hyuk stayed up all night out of guilt. He sets down a bamboo container and a small pouch of rations and marvels that Kang Hyuk did not even flinch when he walked in. Once Beobgang leaves, Kang Hyuk checks that he is alone, then picks up the rations and has to eat one tiny meal a day for a whole week. He gets the rest of what he needs from hunting and has already settled into the routine. On the 6th day, Kang Hyuk does what exercises he can inside the cave to stay warm. He notices something while moving, as his breathing during the exercises is starting to match the inhale and exhale pattern from his void training. He decides to test it by combining his void training with his gymnastics techniques to build something new. He can feel the results in his body right away, though he does not fully understand what he has stumbled onto yet. What he is doing without knowing it is a form of fluid cultivation training. On the 7th day, Beobgang comes to the cave and tells Kang Hyuk his meditation punishment is over and he can get up. Kang Hyuk asks if that means he can talk again. Beobgang says yes and tells him morning training starts soon as he needs to get back to the training grounds. As they walk, Kang Hyuk asks what happened with Mu Kyung. Beobgang explains that they investigated Mu Tae's clan and found that the CO merchant protectors were corrupt. The clan was disbanded and their martial arts privileges were taken away. Mu Kyung's father was given a different position. Beobgang also tells Kang Hyuk that the training level was raised while he was gone, so to keep things fair, he will now have to follow the standard Shaolin training methods. He quietly suggests that Kang Hyuk push his own training even harder on top of that, in his own way. Beobgang says nothing more than as they will see. When they arrive at the hall training ground, Muyul spots Kang Hyuk and runs over to greet him. Kang Hyuk asks how everyone has been. Muyul says it has been really hard. Mu Kyung admits he almost gave up. Gung jumps in and says it was easy for him. Kang Hyuk just looks at his friends. Then the master calls out for everyone to line up and morning training is starting now. A disciple drops a bag on the ground. Kang Hyuk looks over, not sure what is in it. The other boys recognize the sandbags right away and start strapping them to their bodies. Master Hyejong tells them to pick up the bags and get back in position. Kang Hyuk watches and figures this is how they made the training harder. The session is brutal and the kids are soaked in sweat before long. Kang Hyuk, instead of just wearing the sandbags like everyone else, starts using them as dumbbells for his own exercises. The bags are uneven and hard to grip, but he is not trying to become a bodybuilder, so it works just fine for what he needs. 2 disciples watching him shake their heads. He came back from a week of punishment and is already doing things his own way like nothing happened. They notice Beobgang walking toward him and assume he is finally going to set the boy straight. Beobgang walks up and points out that the training has gotten harder. Then he stops. He looks more closely at Kang Hyuk and realizes the boy is already pushing himself far beyond what anyone else in the group is doing. He stays quiet for a moment. Then he feels a heavy, flowing energy coming off the young monk. Beobgang recognizes it immediately as fluid cultivation. Fluid cultivation only becomes possible once someone gets used to gathering chi as building up energy while the body is in motion. Techniques that use chi collected this way allow a person to break past normal physical limits. Things like shattering a rock with bare hands, moving at extreme speeds, or even flying through the air all become possible with this method. Something catches the 2 masters' attention. Kang Hyuk says that he was getting tired of bodyweight exercises anyway and that it is good they brought weights. He picks up the sandbags and starts doing tricep extensions with them. Every other disciple is struggling just to get through the basic training, and here is Kang Hyuk using the sandbags for modern weightlifting like it is nothing. He feels his muscles working and looks satisfied. The other boys stare at him, completely confused about what they are watching. But Beobgang is not confused. He is watching very carefully. He realizes what is happening as Kang Hyuk is using fluid cultivation. He quietly asks the boy to follow him for a moment and they step aside. Master the monk comes over too. He takes one look and confirms it. That is fluid cultivation. He wants to know how long Kang Hyuk has been able to do this. Kang Hyuk thinks fast. He knows he figured it out during his time in the cave, but he cannot admit that since he was supposed to be sitting still and meditating the whole time. So he lies. He says this is the first time he tried it. He makes up a story about his clan's breathing techniques and how the excitement of exercising again made him want to combine them with the inhale and exhale method he learned at Shaolin. That combination, he says, just produced this result on its own. The two masters look at each other, and Monk says that fluid cultivation normally only comes after serious progress in void training. Biob Gang adds that even though void training itself can be picked up in a few years, very few disciples ever actually manage fluid cultivation. That is exactly why after building a solid foundation in void training, disciples usually move on to other mental techniques for controlling chi instead of spending 12 hours a day chasing fluid cultivation. But if someone managed to learn both void training and fluid cultivation in just a few days like Kanghyuk did, their inner chi would grow at a speed nobody has ever seen before. The monk wonders just how fast this boy will pick up the more advanced mental techniques if fluid cultivation came this easily to him. He collects himself and asks Kanghyuk directly, as does that mean he can use fluid cultivation whenever he wants. Kanghyuk says he can only do it when he uses his clan's training methods. Then he asks if he can go back to training. The monk lets him go. As Kanghyuk runs back to the courtyard, the two masters look at each other and admit they got worked up over nothing. Kanghyuk jogs back to his friends and asks Mukyung if they should keep going. He then notices the others and asks if they are practicing the four-limb extension technique. Muyul says yes and explains that the other two looked interested, so he just taught them. Gung says Muyul is a surprisingly good teacher and that he feels better after practicing, even though it still hurts. Kanghyuk thinks back to when he first showed Muyul how to stretch and is surprised by how quickly the boy picked it up. He had not paid much attention to Muyul before since he does not appear in Jaeyoung's books. But watching him now, Kanghyuk notices something. His technique is clean and simple at the same time. He wonders if that simplicity is actually what held Muyul back from ever becoming a true master, as he probably does not even know the meridians. Kanghyuk makes a mental note to look into that later. He turns his attention to Gung and asks how he has been doing, and he tells him he wants to see what Muyul has taught him. Gung tries to count through the exercise movements, struggling a little but pushing through with some encouragement. They work through the military calisthenics routine together. One of them asks mid-exercise if it is normal for the sides of his body to hurt this much. Kanghyuk moves around and corrects their form as he tells Gung to stop clenching his fists and tells Mukyung to stretch his arm out fully. Then he announces the next exercise is breathing. The boys line up and follow along. Gung watches and says this part is easy, and that everyone is doing well. Then his eyes land on Muyul. The boy's flexibility is on another level. The other monks around him look genuinely shocked watching him move. Kanghyuk observes Muyul quietly as skilled but simple. Then his eyes drift to Mukyung, the boy who beat up Mute. Gung watches them all and decides that no matter how impressive everyone else turns out to be, he is going to keep up with them without breaking a sweat. Thanks to the addition of sand pouches being brought into the dawn training sessions, what used to be a grueling routine has turned into something that Kanghyuk actually finds enjoyable, since it basically works out to doing various free weight exercises that he is already familiar with. On top of that, he makes good use of whatever free time he has by practicing his energy accumulation training on his own. Through consistent energy breathing and dedicated practice, he is able to steadily build up more and more energy inside himself and grow noticeably stronger as time goes on. Before long, the other Shaolin monks around him start picking up on the fact that Kanghyuk's shoulders have gotten significantly wider and broader than before, and many of them figure that it is probably connected to that special training method that he has been doing together with Gung and the other guy. 10 days after that, during one of the early dawn training sessions, the head monk gathers everyone together and announces that their next step forward will be learning the inner energy cultivation method. He explains that the first move they will be working on is the core punch, and that it begins with circulating energy through the body and then drawing the accumulated energy sitting in their energy core and pushing it past the energy C point and through the gastric cavity point. After taking all of this in, Kanghyuk works through it in his head and comes to the conclusion that once he gathers all of the accumulated energy sitting in his energy core, he is going to need to divide and split it in a ratio of 7:3 in order to move forward properly with the technique. When Kanghyuk shoots a chain punch, he gets surprised to see how powerful it works. He then wonders if this is the concept of one where a part of his body is strengthened as the acupoints are stimulated by his energy. After a couple of minutes of thinking, Kanghyuk thinks that since he needs to send energy into his legs and not just his arms, he must be able to control his body as a whole. However, Kanghyuk knows that being able to pull off such complicated steps smoothly in the middle of a real fight is a completely different story, and he finds himself wondering just how much more training he is going to have to put in before he reaches that level. Kanghyuk then looks over and notices that one of his friends, Muyul, is doing the whole thing completely wrong and immediately steps in to stop him before he goes any further. It turns out that the boy has basically no solid understanding of anything they have covered so far, and now Kanghyuk finds himself in the position of having to sit down and explain everything to him from the ground up. After that, Ha-young and the second-class disciples settle into a routine where they introduce and teach one new step every single day, and since what they are covering is foundational martial arts, there are not all that many moves to get through in total, which means they are able to work through and cover everything within the span of just 10 days. Even so, everyone trains at their own pace and is grouped and guided separately depending on how quickly or slowly their individual progress moves along. 71 days later, Kanghyuk, Gung, Mukyung, and Muyol have all successfully worked their way through and mastered all 10 moves of the chain punch. On that same day, Haeyoung picks up on the fact that something seems to be weighing on Beobgang's mind and decides to walk over and check in with him about it. Beobgang tells him that what is bothering him has to do with Kanghyuk. After that, Haejun calls Kanghyuk, who is completely confused and wonders why he would call him like that. Kanghyuk notices something weird about Haejun, that he is glancing at different parts of his body which are freaky. Haejun then asks Kanghyuk what he have been doing these days, and he replies that he is just busy with side quest, like he wanted to stand in a different position. Haejun then tells him that he wanted to confirm something from his own eyes, so that's the reason why he called him here. He goes on to say that in his opinion, Kanghyuk's body has grown and developed at a pace that is noticeably faster than any of the other peers who joined the Shaolin Temple around the same time as him. Haejun then asks him directly whether it is true that his eye-catching physical growth is the result of the family training method that he has been consistently practicing on his own. Kanghyuk fires back and asks whether Haejun is essentially trying to find out if his personal training method is actually better and more effective than what the Shaolin Temple has been teaching all along. Haejun quickly clarifies that this is not what he is getting at all, explaining that the Shaolin Temple is not the kind of place that is narrow-minded or resistant to outside ideas, and that what he actually wants to do is put a proposal forward to him. Haejun then lays out his thinking, explaining that the reason the Shaolin Temple has managed to survive and thrive for thousands of years is precisely because it has always maintained the mindset of being willing to identify and fix its own shortcomings while also being open to taking in and adopting whatever is genuinely good and beneficial from the outside. He tells Kanghyuk that if he is able to demonstrate that his family's training method is truly effective, then he might consider accepting it as part of what the temple practices. It turns out, before Haejun was a martial artist, he's a monk who practiced asceticism to become Buddha. Even though Haejun could get punished by the discipline court, he still took the gamble so that the Shaolin Temple can become even stronger. Kanghyuk points out that there are more than 70 new monks to deal with on top of needing to keep up with his own personal training as well, and that ever since the incident that happened before, people around him have been looking at him and treating him like he has completely lost his mind. Despite all of that, he tells Haejun that if he genuinely wants to put things to the test, then he has one condition that needs to be agreed upon before anything else moves forward. The following morning, Kanghyuk gets everyone up and wakes all the Shaolin monk boys up at an extremely early hour, well before most of them were expecting to be out of bed. The monk standing off to the side explains to the confused and groggy group that the reason they have been pulled out of sleep this early is because they will be adding a new round of training beforehand to properly warm their bodies up before the regular dawn training even begins. On top of that, he makes it known that Kanghyuk will be personally overseeing and watching over their daily dawn training from here on out. At first, the reaction from the group is laughter, with many of them not taking the situation seriously at all. However, Kanghyuk wastes no time in making his presence felt and lets his anger show in a way that is intense enough to wipe the smiles off of everyone's faces and leave the whole group feeling genuinely unsettled and scared. Then, catching everyone completely off guard, Kanghyuk tells the entire group to come at him all at once, letting them know that they are going to be jumping straight into a free-for-all spar right then and there. Kanghyuk manages to beat a whole group of students without breaking much of a sweat and makes it clear to all of them that he will be the one leading their training from this point forward. He also makes sure to remind them that during dawn training, they are not to forget to address him properly as instructor at all times. He then lays out the rules for their session, telling everyone to get into their training and warning them that if any of their stomachs touch the ground while they are at it, the sand punches they owe will be doubled on the spot as punishment. Kanghyuk's training method continues to move along smoothly and without any major hiccups, though he is not taking on the responsibility of managing all 70 of the new monks entirely by himself. His friends step up and serve as his assistants, helping to guide and oversee the training in all the areas and techniques that they have already learned and worked through together. On top of that, Beobgang, who has always carried himself more like a disciplined soldier than anything else, has been able to find and settle into the perfect training routine for himself through everything that Kanghyuk has shown and taught him along the way. As it turns out, even the kids who were slacking off and fooling around not too long ago are now throwing themselves into training with real effort and focus. The results of the training begin showing up quickly among the young monks, and it is likely due to their age that there is already a clear and obvious improvement showing in both their stamina and their overall physical build. As for the older monks who had felt somewhat uneasy and uncertain about Kanghyuk stepping into the role of instructor, they have gradually come around and begun placing their trust in him, won over by the undeniable results that his methods have been producing. Kanghyuk had put in a request to Monk Hyun-sung for some proper gym equipment to be brought in for the training monks, and after waiting, it finally arrives. Since Kang Hyuk had not been finding enough time to dedicate to his own personal training alongside everything else he was managing, he had gone ahead and made a special request for this custom-made set to be put together for him. 4 months later, through staying consistent and never letting up on his training, Kang Hyuk is able to break through and improve himself to an entirely new level. The bar and the wooden weights that he is now lifting on a regular basis are coming in at around 90 kilograms, which is a significant jump from where he started. Kang Hyuk finds himself genuinely enjoying and feeling deeply satisfied with the life he has built here, spending his days managing a large number of young monks and keeping everything running while also making sure he is putting in serious and dedicated work on his own personal training at the same time. Finally, after years of building up to this moment, the last and most important test for the new monks gets underway, the very examination that is used to determine which disciples will be chosen to train directly under the Shaolin temple itself. Half a year after that, Kang Hyuk has grown even stronger and more muscular than he already was, with the physical changes in him being impossible to miss. Around this time, the head monk pays a visit to Hyun Chun in order to sit down and have a conversation about the admissions process that is currently taking place. As it turns out, the test to get into the Shaolin temple is actually pretty straightforward in how it works, as the person taking the test simply has to go up against and fight one of the second-class disciples in a one-on-one match. The instructor candidates from each hall who are present to help oversee and watch the test are the ones who get to make the final call on who ends up becoming a third-class disciple under their particular hall. The second-class disciple taking part in the fight will not be going all out or fighting at their full strength during the match, so that the person being tested has a fair and open chance to step up and properly show off what they are capable of. Muyol then steps forward and gets ready to go, clearly looking like he is there to have a good time with the new monks, and to everyone's surprise he ends up performing remarkably well against his candidate and putting on a show that nobody was expecting from him. Everyone watching is caught off guard by the fact that Muyol's instincts during a fight are almost animalistic in nature, and the way his body moves throughout the match looks just like that of an animal as well. On top of all of that, he shows really sharp and reliable judgment in the heat of the moment alongside a body that is both strong and impressively flexible at the same time. Hae-gul turns to Beob-hyun and tells him to pay close attention to what is happening in the match, because he has a feeling that Muyol is going to end up becoming his disciple and falling under their group before all is said and done. Kang Hyuk watches as well and thinks to himself that Muyol's insane level of flexibility is a genuine talent that sets him apart, and that he has always wanted to push him and draw out his full potential since he first noticed it. For Muyol, who had struggled and found himself completely lost and confused when it came to understanding the acupoints and the flow of energy, he had simply set all of that aside and put his entire focus into learning and memorizing the steps of the martial arts moves and figuring out how each one connects and links into the next, even without truly grasping the flow behind it all. So, he made sure the movement of the martial art and the flow of inner energy was engraved into his body through practice. After that, it's finally Mu Gung's turn and now he looks like a complete beast. Seeing him step forward, everyone around is completely shocked and some of them find themselves wondering out loud whether he lied about his age to get in, because he simply does not look like someone who fits in with the rest of the group. As it turns out, Gung has spent the past 2 years pouring everything he has into training specifically for this very moment, grinding through and enduring every single one of those brutal and punishing training sessions without ever giving up or backing down. However, Kang Hyuk knows from working closely with him that the trade-off for having that kind of raw and impressive strength that comes with his large and powerful build is that his body is not particularly flexible and struggles when it comes to movement that requires a wider range of motion. That is exactly why Kang Hyuk put together a training schedule specifically designed around getting him to reach a solid and functional level of flexibility first before shifting the focus over to building up his strength on top of that foundation. Drawing on that pure and overwhelming strength of his, Gung manages to give his opponent an incredibly tough and grueling time throughout the match and makes it clear that he is not someone to be taken lightly. Hae-dam, who is the successor of the unmovable invincible body art, also makes an appearance and watches the show. He gets surprised to see Gung's performance in front of everyone. After that, the attention shifts and it becomes Mu Kyung's turn to step up, and even though he is still carrying the weight of his trauma and has not fully worked through it yet, he still manages to put on a genuinely solid and impressive performance that surprises those watching. Suddenly, a strange figure is spotted sitting up on top of a tower, casually watching what is going on below and taking a moment to realize that the Shaolin admission test is currently underway. As he looks down and scans over the fighters taking part, his eyes land on Mu Kyung and he finds himself genuinely intrigued, deciding right then and there that he is going to handle and deal with that one personally. This strange and unusual figure turns out to be none other than Monk Hae-guan, and the other monks around are immediately furious with him the moment they spot him, since he has shown up drinking alcohol right there within the walls of the temple where it is strictly forbidden. Hae-guan then raises his voice and calls out to everyone, saying that he wants to offer his apologies to both the seniors and the juniors who are present and watching, before going on to announce loudly that he wants to take Mu Kyung under his wing as his student. He explains his reasoning by saying that while the boy clearly possesses exceptional and outstanding abilities, the streak of insanity that he has already shown during the test means that the best and most fitting person to take him on and guide him would be Haiguan himself, given that he leads the Demon Extermination Squad. He goes on to explain that the Demon Extermination Squad holds a unique and special position within the Shaolin Temple, as they are the only group within the entire temple that is exempt from the strict law of no killing, and because of that, they walk a path that is closer to that of the Asuras than anything else. It is a place where people come together with the sole purpose of hunting down and eliminating truly terrible and evil beings that are beyond any hope of being guided or reformed, all in order to protect the world from the harm they would otherwise cause. One of the older monks thinks to himself that if that child were to go and train under Haiguan, who is known for fighting against demons, then Haiguan might actually be the right person to help him get a grip on and bring under control the dangerous streak of insanity that seems to be building inside him. After making his announcement, Haiguan declared with a laugh that he would be taking Mu Kyung in as his student, and then leaped clean over the wall in one smooth motion as if to make it perfectly clear that he had no interest whatsoever in sticking around to watch the rest of the test play out. Finally, it is Kanghyuk's turn to step up, and Haijun turns to the older monk beside him and tells him plainly that Kanghyuk is the strongest monk they have among everyone present here today. In a flashback, Biob Gang and Kanghyuk are seen training together and going deep into all kinds of conversations covering everything from energy to training methods and everything in between. During one of those conversations, Biob Gang told him about the Iron Guard that exists out in the wider world beyond Shaolin, which was brought out and spread by those who ended up leaving Shaolin after finding themselves unable to fully master the Iron Guard while they were there. Since Kanghyuk has proven himself to be a natural genius when it comes to picking up and mastering martial arts at a speed that most people cannot match, it is worth noting that in order to earn the rank of third-class disciple, a monk must reach at least 70% completion in each of the 3 foundational martial arts of the Shaolin Temple within the span of a single year. After that, Kanghyuk charges at his opponent in an instant and uses the first technique of chain punch. Kanghyuk gathers strength in his lower body by combining the principles of 9 regal kicks and swift whirlwind sweep, and then used the 6th technique of Guanyin strikes principle to strengthen the core of his body to amplify its power. Lastly, he used the fist technique of the chain punches principle to give a boost to his shoulder. Kanghyuk then once again charges at his opponent with a punch, but instead he just uses a feint. He then engages with a continuous attack with his opponent, who is taken aback because of his incredible strength. Seeing that, an old man can't believe he's able to exert so much power with the little energy he has, and so far he has only used basic moves of martial arts. He also thinks that instead of learning the next step, he has created something totally new by combining what he's learned. Kanghyuk thinks that he has been training his body and his martial arts continuously for close to 2 years, but he never had an opportunity to use his strength properly during these past 2 years. Right now, being able to use his full strength without worrying about injuring his opponent is the true sparring. The nervousness that comes with fighting someone strong and the exhilaration of fighting with everything one has. Just then, the entire place turns into surprise because the Grand Master Hyun Guang himself showed up. Kanghyuk stands there feeling confused, thinking to himself that this person must be someone incredibly influential and important given the way everybody around him is bowing and paying their respects without hesitation. The Grand Master then speaks up and says that the reason he stepped forward and made himself known is because he has a question that he wants to put to Kanghyuk directly. He asks Kanghyuk if he would be willing to lower his robe, and when Kanghyuk does, the Grand Master gets a clear look at the impressively muscular and well-built body underneath. The Grand Master then brings up the fight from earlier and tells Kanghyuk that he noticed he was combining the 6 basic martial arts together into one fluid and unified approach during the fight, and asks him whether there is a specific reason behind why he chose to train his body in a way that was specifically geared toward being able to use that kind of martial art. Kanghyuk is genuinely caught off guard and surprised that the old man was sharp enough to pick up on that detail from just watching. The Grand Master then follows up and asks him why he made the choice to go down that particular path instead of simply branching out and learning other martial arts along the way. Kanghyuk thinks about it and tells him honestly that he is not all that smart, and that because of that, instead of trying to take on many different martial arts and making everything unnecessarily complicated for himself, he figured it made more sense to take what he had and combine it all together into something he could actually master. As it turns out, the deeper reason behind Kanghyuk going down this path is rooted in the fact that he is not the original protagonist of the novel, Mu Jin, and does not have the natural gifts and talents that come with being that character. That night, long after everything had settled down, Kanghyuk lay there wondering to himself whether that old man was actually someone of tremendous power and ability, even though his body had looked pretty worn down and damaged from the outside. It turns out, at one point the Grand Master was known as the world's greatest martial talent. Back when all the second-class disciples including Kanghyuk and Hyun as part of their name, Hyun Gwang has already accomplished exceptional feats at the mere age of 32 years old. At that time, the Shaolin Temple had guessed that Hyun Gwang would easily become the strongest in the world in 10 years' time. That night, Kanghyuk is sitting with the old men and asks him about the condition of his body. The old man replies that the reason it became like this is because of the invasion of the demonic cult. He explains that during the time when he was a second-class disciple, the demonic cult invaded the peaceful Central Plains. Since one of their values was to protect lives, they also fought in order to stop them. The older monks had made the decision to stop Hyun Gwang from going off and participating in the war because he had been given the important responsibility of staying behind and leading and shaping the future generation of Shaolin monks, as that task was considered too critical to put at risk. In his place, their seniors who carried the titles of Kong and Jiam were the ones who ended up having to go and take part in the war instead. In the end, because Hyun Gwang kept throwing himself directly into dangerous situations over and over again in order to protect and save the people around him, the serious wounds he kept taking on continued to pile up and grow in number with each passing encounter. Kanghyuk puts all of this together and comes to the realization that the terrible state the Grandmaster Hyun Gwang is currently in is a direct result of all the injuries he took on and accumulated during that period of his life. Kanghyuk then speaks up with a noticeable sense of excitement in his voice and tells the old man that he genuinely believes he can help him, going on to explain that while it would be completely impossible to restore his inner energy back to what it once was, and equally impossible to get him back to his original state and condition, what he can realistically do is help him reach the point where he is able to walk on his own 2 feet independently again without needing anyone's support. After laying that out, Kanghyuk goes on to tell him about the work he did with Biob Gang and how he managed to get his knees working significantly better through the treatment and exercises he put him through. Kanghyuk then brings up the topic of electricity with the old man, who upon hearing this reaches out and calls 2 specific monks into the room. These 2 monks happen to specialize in electricity-based martial arts that work directly to stimulate and boost the muscles of the body. Kanghyuk instructs the monks to send electricity directly into the Grandmaster's muscles, explaining to them that when a small and controlled amount of electricity is introduced into the muscles, it has the ability to speed up and accelerate the metabolism of the muscles as well as get the circulation of blood moving more effectively throughout the body. On top of that, he explains that it can also work to increase the actual size of the muscle fibers themselves through the repeated contracting of the muscles that the electrical stimulation causes. The monk listening to all of this is genuinely surprised and taken aback to learn that there are so many significant benefits that can come from something as straightforward as sending electricity into the muscles. Kanghyuk then follows up by telling them that they cannot be completely certain about the full extent of the results until they actually go ahead and apply the treatment to the Grandmaster directly, but that they should start seeing some noticeable effects showing up after roughly 1 month of consistent treatments. Kanghyuk then turns to one of the other monks and tells him to go ahead and direct his yang energy onto him so they can test how it feels, and when the monk does, Kanghyuk immediately winces and feels a sharp burst of pain shoot through him. Kanghyuk quickly tells him that he cannot apply it that directly and that all he needs to do is channel his extreme yang energy and hold his palm close to the target area without making direct contact. As things get organized and roles are assigned, it turns out that one of the monks named Hyun Gong will be stepping up and taking on the role of handling the electrical stimulation treatment, while Hai Dam will be taking on the role of operating what essentially functions as a device known as shortwave diathermy. Hai Dam asks Kanghyuk how they can trust techniques that only he know of and then actually use them. Since Kanghyuk had worked as a personal trainer back in his previous life, he had not only gone out and obtained the officially recognized physical therapist license in Korea, but had also gone the extra mile and earned himself a license for rehabilitation massage on top of that. The reason he pushed himself to study and learn so much was deeply personal, as it all stemmed from his desire to gain the correct and proper knowledge needed to treat and work through the damage that his own body had suffered in the past. Kanghyuk then turns to the monk and tells him plainly that the only reason he chose to step forward and get involved in the situation is because he sincerely and genuinely wants to help the Grandmaster get better, and that there is no other motive behind what he is doing. Hai Dam then speaks up and makes the terms very clear, saying that they are willing to go along with and follow Kanghyuk's instructions for a period of 1 month, but that if there is no visible and meaningful improvement to show for it within that month's time, then they will make absolutely sure that he pays a serious price for having the audacity to ridicule and disrespect his elders the way he did. The next day, Kanghyuk heads over to the Grandmaster's place together with the other monks, coming to fill the Grandmaster in on everything that Kanghyuk has been doing and to explain clearly why they have all shown up at his door. When Kanghyuk gets his first proper look at the old man's body and takes in the full picture of his physical condition, he is completely caught off guard and visibly shocked by just how bad and severe the situation actually is. The Grandmaster lay quietly on his bed, watching Kanghyuk without saying a single word. The more he looked at the young disciple, the more he could tell that something was really bothering him. It was written all over Kang Hyuk's face. Kang Hyuk then tells the master that he had finished his part of the treatment for the day and that it was now the master's turn. Everything went just the way they had practiced the night before, with the infrared therapy and the electrical stimulation both going smoothly from start to finish. Later that night, after the treatment was done, Kang Hyuk packed up his things and moved out of the hall and into the Grandmaster's room. When he first settled in, he felt quietly happy about leaving behind the crowded hall full of monks. That feeling didn't last long, though, because he quickly realized he would still have to sleep near them in order to keep watch over the master. He had been hoping for some privacy, but he pushed that thought aside and focused on getting some rest. As he lay there, his mind started wandering. He thought about how bad the master's condition really was, and he began to wonder if the old man had been living with pain for years without anyone around him truly noticing or caring. That thought tugged at something deep inside him, and before long he found himself thinking about his own grandfather, missing him in a way that caught him a little off guard. A memory came to him. He was young, sitting beside his grandfather and carefully rubbing the old man's sore leg. He asked his grandfather if it felt any better, and the old man smiled and told him that he had a magic touch. The young boy made a quiet but serious promise that he would study hard and learn everything he could so that one day he would be able to take the pain away for good. His grandfather looked at him with so much pride, telling him he couldn't wait to see the person he would grow up to be. In a flashback, he is walking alongside his grandfather in a hospital hallway, helping him push along an four stand, and then he gets a memory of the funeral. He stood there crying while his grandmother held him close, and all he could think about was how little he had actually done for the man he loved so much. A few massages felt like nothing. He blamed himself quietly and called himself useless inside his own head. After his grandfather passed, his grandmother asked him what he planned to do with his life. He told her plainly that college wasn't something he was interested in and that he wanted to go a different way. He started studying physical therapy and training methods for older people, and somewhere along the way he came across a military recruitment poster and felt drawn to it. He joined up and went home to tell his grandmother, holding her hands and promising that now he had a stable job and that he was going to take care of her the way his grandfather would have wanted. But the military kept him busy and far away most of the time. His grandmother would call and ask if he was coming home, and the answer was almost always no because there was training or a mission. He told himself again and again that he was doing what his grandfather would have wanted, and he held on to that thought through every difficult moment. After that, he gets news that his grandmother passed away and he was only given 3 days off because she wasn't considered his biological mother by military rules, so he was told to return as soon as possible. He pushed on through the jungle on that mission, and when he slipped on a steep slope and fell, his mind filled with images of sitting peacefully with his grandparents, wishing with everything he had that he could have done more for them. The next morning, the monk walked in and found the Grandmaster already awake and watching the sleeping boy. The master listened as Kang Hyuk says that he missed them, and understood right away what was driving the young man so hard. With real gentleness, he told Kang Hyuk that he could call him Grandpa instead of Master if he wanted to. The other disciples were shocked, but the Grandmaster just laughed, and for the first time in a long while, the room felt a little warmer. One of the masters looks at Kang Hyuk and announces that the time has come to cut his hair. Kang Hyuk freezes. The monk follows up by explaining that while his hair is nowhere near as long as someone from the outside world, it has grown enough that it needs to go. Another monk waves the whole thing along, telling Kang Hyuk they will handle the master's treatment while he deals with it. Kang Hyuk is not going to let this happen without a fight. He tears into a room stuffed with old documents and starts ripping through everything in sight. He needs a historical rule, a written precedent, any scrap of text he can hold up as a reason to keep his hair. He searches until his hands are shaking and comes up with absolutely nothing. He groans, thinking about every single day he spent growing it out. In a flashback, he once asked a master why monks shaved their heads and the master told him it was cutting ties with the outside world. Every trim was a reminder of the path to enlightenment. Kang Hyuk asked if it was purely symbolic, and the master confirmed it was, pointing out that Bodhidharma and Buddha himself had done the same. It was the very first step toward breaking free from the cycle of suffering, the master said, and a tradition worth honoring. Kang Hyuk snaps back to the present and says that the tradition is far too strict. He keeps searching, finds nothing, and finally collapses on the floor. He grumbles that he never wanted to come to Shaolin to begin with, that he simply fell asleep reading a novel and woke up here. Then something stops him cold. He sits up and starts retracing every moment he can remember. The hospital memory hits the hardest as a doctor sat across from him and told him he was losing hair from stress, that if nothing changed he could go completely bald. Kang Hyuk grabs his own head at the memory, a fresh wave of embarrassment rolling over him. However, the diagnosis still haunts him because now he has to shave off whatever he has left on his head. He recalls that master said cutting hair means cutting ties with the outside world. He thinks that cutting those ties does not actually require a razor to the scalp, and he need to find some other way. To find a solution, he runs out of the room. The next day arrives peacefully at the temple. When the masters gather and notice that Kang Hyuk's hair is untouched, they ask him directly why nothing was done. Kang Hyuk tells them, completely calm, that he did cut his hair. Everyone stares at him. The head monk looks at him like he has said something in a foreign language and presses for an explanation. Kang Hyuk lays out his reasoning without flinching. He says the whole point of cutting hair is to cut ties with the outside world, and that nobody on earth would look at what he has done to his head and think he still belongs to normal society. He also shaved a Buddha symbol into the side as his own form of tribute. He asks them directly whether the intention itself isn't worth something, even if the result looks nothing like a traditional cut. Two of the masters stare at him without a trace of amusement. The Grand Master laughs out loud and says that meaning carries more weight than the method. The monk arrives at the door, steps inside, and immediately stops when he sees Kang Hyuk's head. He reminds everyone that he was specifically sent to handle this. He tells Kang Hyuk that hair is a symbol of worldly desire and that cutting it is the path to enlightenment. Kang Hyuk looks back at him and says that is exactly why he cut it the way he did. The monk pushes back, saying the hair that remains still represents attachment to the world. Kang Hyuk fires back that Bodhidharma himself did not shave everything off. He goes further, arguing that if the true purpose is to show willingness to carry the suffering of others, then every hair on the body should go. He turns his eyes to the masters and their long beards and asks with a straight face whether that means everyone should be shaving their faces too. The masters think it through and are forced to admit that Kang Hyuk did shave part of his head, did add the Buddha symbol, and that the haircut he is sporting would get him thrown out of any normal place in the outside world. Hyung Gong breaks first and says that as long as the hair does not grow back, it can be permitted. Since Hyung Gong has no intention of touching his own beard, the argument dies there. Training opens before sunrise the next morning. Beep Gang spots Kang Hyuk immediately and demands to know what is going on with his hair. Kang Hyuk tells him Master Hyung approved it. Beep Gang goes still for a moment, calls it a miracle Kang Hyuk is still breathing, and then orders training to begin. The moment someone as strict as Beep Gang lets it go, the younger disciples start paying close attention. Many of them are still at the age where appearances matter and standing out carries its own appeal. Kang Hyuk's approach plants a seed. Gung quietly pulls him aside and asks how he managed to pull it off, telling Kang Hyuk he wants to try the same thing with his own hair. Kang Hyuk tells him honestly that he can explain it but doubts the outcome will be the same. Gung tries anyway. He stands before the masters and argues that hair reflects the will of Buddha and that as long as he walks the path to enlightenment, shaving his head is not a requirement. He waits, looking hopeful. As the treatment continues, Kang Hyuk looks at the Grandmaster's condition and realizes the whole body needs work, but throwing everything at it at once would do more damage than good. He thinks it through and comes up with a plan that works like a training split. One day targets the lower legs, the next the upper legs, then the waist and hips, then the shoulders and arms. Hyung Gong and Haidam follow the same schedule and stick to it without question. Since Kang Hyuk is technically a Shaolin disciple and not the temple's official physician, he wraps up each session and heads out, calling the Grandmaster Grandpa on his way through the door. The Grandmaster wishes him a good day, and Biob assures Kang Hyuk that he will keep watch. Even so, Kang Hyuk shows up at the hall every single day outside of treatment hours, making it clear this is not something he is handling halfway. Inside the hall master's quarters, news arrives that the abbot has approved the extra funding they requested. Kang Hyuk asks immediately whether this means they can finally get all the equipment they need, and the master confirms it. The administrative hall has officially recognized the training methods, and going forward, all physical training in the hall will follow Kang Hyuk's approach. Kang Hyuk smiles at that since the methods everyone once looked at sideways are now being taken seriously. He asks whether this means he has to personally teach every single person in the hall. The master tells him to relax. He just needs to teach the second-level disciples how to use the equipment properly. He then hands Kang Hyuk a thick stack of papers. Kang Hyuk stares at them and asks what they are for. The master tells him to write down every piece of additional equipment he needs, with full explanations for each item. Kang Hyuk's face lights up. With proper equipment, he can run training that actually looks like something from the modern world. He starts thinking out loud and asks whether it is possible to request equipment for a separate location, and whether he can put in a larger order than expected. Then he gets to the real point. He wants to request specific equipment for his grandpa, Master the Grandmaster. The master looks worried right away and says that exercise might be too hard on the old man's body. Kang Hyuk clarifies that this is therapeutic equipment, a completely different thing. The master listens carefully as Kang Hyuk explains the plan. It centers on Pilates, which most people today think of as something designed for women, but was actually developed to help injured soldiers recover. That history makes it exactly what the Grandmaster needs. The master agrees and tells him the administrative hall will not turn down the request. He gives Kang Hyuk the go-ahead. Kang Hyuk starts writing the Pilates equipment list and stops halfway through. A problem hits him. Equipment like foam rollers and resistance bands is made from rubber and plastic, and neither of those materials exists in this era. He thinks it through and decides that springs and metal frames wrapped in thick leather can do the same job. Then he looks at the total cost, throws the list at the master without a word, and walks out. The master is left staring at the numbers, quietly panicking about the temple's finances. 2 hours later, Kang Hyuk finally finishes his meeting with Hyeonsong and makes his way to where his friends are eating. They wave him over and tell him he is running a little late today. Gung immediately notices the dramatic change to his hair and starts to ask about it, but Kang Hyuk remembers that Gung is now under Master Heedum and shifts the conversation. One of the younger monks nearby looks like he is about to cry and claims he has something in his eye. Kang Hyuk turns to Muyul and asks how things are going. Muyul says he is fine, but there is a problem. He mentions the master said he would be coming to visit today, and Kang Hyuk has no idea what to make of that. The reason becomes clear when the scene cuts to Haigul elsewhere, blaming himself for picking Muyul as his disciple. He was certain he had chosen well. But Muyul turns out to be someone who gets distracted mid-session by ants on the ground. Haigul says that for every one thing he teaches the boy, Muyul forgets 2, and for every 2 things, he forgets 10. He starts to genuinely worry that the 5 fists of Shaolin will not survive into the next generation. Then Muyul spots him in the distance, breaks into a huge smile, and sprints over calling his name. Haigul watches him come and admits to himself that the smile is a problem, because it is impossible to stay angry at someone who looks that happy to see you. Haigul asks Muyul how he managed to learn martial arts during his novice period. Muyul tells him cheerfully that Kang Hyuk helped him, and then adds that Kang Hyuk also helped Gung and Mu Kyung. Something clicks for Haigul. He remembers that Kang Hyuk is the disciple the Grandmaster personally took in, and he decides he needs to find out exactly what technique turned a hopeless student into someone functional. He invites Muyul to go with him to find Kang Hyuk, and Muyul agrees without a second thought. In the refectory, Haigul walks up to Kang Hyuk and introduces himself. The other young monks go quiet and tense the moment they see who it is. Kang Hyuk asks what brings him there. Haigul says he has something to discuss with both Kang Hyuk and Master the Grandmaster and asks him to come along after the meal. They make their way to the Grandmaster's quarters, and Kang Hyuk still cannot figure out why he specifically is needed for this. Muyul runs ahead and greets the Grandmaster, who calls him a cheerful child. Kang Hyuk notices Haigul watching him with a fixed stare and wonders quietly whether he has done something wrong. The Grandmaster welcomes them and asks what brings everyone to his door. Haigul explains that he came to ask Kang Hyuk something. He leans in and tells the Grandmaster honestly that training Muyul is one of the hardest things he has ever done, and that he heard Kang Hyuk had helped the boy before. He admits plainly that even the most basic of the 5 fists of Shaolin is beyond Muyul's grasp right now, and that he needs Kang Hyuk's help. The Grandmaster listens and then asks them to explain how the choice was made and requests a demonstration from Kang Hyuk. Haigul pauses when he hears Kang Hyuk call the Grandmaster Grandpa, clearly caught off guard by it. Haigul then asks whether Kang Hyuk has actually sparred with Muyul before. Kang Hyuk confirms it without hesitation, saying they fought plenty of times back when both of them were novices. Afterward, Kang Hyuk goes against Muyul and tells him to have fun that makes the others surprise. We then get to know about Shaolin's 5 hand strikes, a martial art created by Dharma, and he's said to have created it by taking references from 5 animals. Even so, this martial arts is still vastly different from the other martial arts in Shaolin Temple. The Shaolin 5 punches legacy is being carried on, but just barely. Haigul is the only successor for the Shaolin 5 hand strikes and has a duty to protect its legacy. The old man finally realizes the reason why Kang Hyuk was so desperate to know if Muyul is really suited to use the Shaolin 5 hand strikes. Both of them continue to fight with each other until the monk tells them to stop. The old man then tells Haigul to bring Kang Hyuk with him. He also says that he wants him to also teach Kang Hyuk the Shaolin's 5 hand strikes. When the Grandmaster mentions that he is entrusting Kang Hyuk to him for a while, that surprises both of them. Haigul tells the Grandmaster that the Shaolin's 5 hand strikes are different from the other Shaolin martial arts, but the Grandmaster tells him not to worry as this will be a great help to Kang Hyuk as well. The next day, Kang Hyuk steps into the training ground so he could learn the Shaolin's 5 hand strikes. Deep down, Haigul thinks to himself that he has somehow managed to bring back yet another complete idiot and finds himself genuinely wondering why Grandmaster Hyunguang would ever ask him to take on the responsibility of teaching Kang Hyuk the Shaolin 5 in the first place. On the other hand, Kang Hyuk is not completely oblivious to the situation and finds himself realizing fairly quickly just how frustrated and exasperated Haigul must be feeling on the inside right now. After that uncomfortable moment passes, their training gets underway with Haigul deciding to start things off by introducing him to the simplest technique in the set first, which happens to be the crane strike. Haigul then instructs Byobhyun to step forward and give a full demonstration of everything for them to watch, and when Kang Hyuk sees it play out in front of him, he is genuinely caught off guard and surprised by what he witnesses. Kang Hyuk and Muyul then both attempt to follow along and replicate what they are being shown, but both of them find themselves struggling to get it right and hitting a wall pretty quickly. As he works through it, Kang Hyuk starts thinking to himself that there must be a deeper reason behind why the Grandmaster specifically sent him here to learn this, and that it probably goes further than what is obvious on the surface. However, sitting alongside all of this is the fact that the martial arts Kang Hyuk is currently working with and relying on is what could be called a hybrid martial arts style, and it comes loaded with quite a significant amount of risk that cannot simply be ignored. Kang Hyuk turns to Muyul and asks him directly whether he has ever actually seen a crane in person before, and Muyul replies honestly that he has never seen one in his life up until this point. Kang Hyuk thinks to himself that the Shaolin 5 hands technique is said to have been originally created by carefully studying and modeling after the natural forms and movements of 5 different animals, so it struck him as genuinely strange and puzzling that Muyul, who possesses such a monstrous and almost unnatural level of flexibility, was somehow unable to follow and keep up with the moves the way everyone expected him to. Kang Hyuk then turns to the others and explains clearly that the crane strike is a technique that draws its reference and inspiration directly from the natural movements of a real crane, but that the whole problem with Muyul is that he has been sitting there trying to imitate a crane when he has absolutely no idea how a crane actually moves or what one even looks like in real life. Kang Hyuk also points out that all of them are essentially just doing their best to recreate and imitate those animal movements using a human body, and that up until now they have been training Muyul strictly based on the moves and instructions laid out in the manual without going any further than that. Kang Hyuk gets visibly frustrated and says flat out that this approach is simply never going to work with Muyul because his head is as empty as a rock when it comes to learning things this way. The monks around him look confused by what he means, so Kang Hyuk spells it out for them and explains that Muyul is just not the kind of person who can learn effectively through forms or written manuals that attempt to copy a crane, but that if you put him in front of a real crane and let him watch it move, he will be able to pick up and copy those movements naturally and entirely on his own. At that moment, Haigul finally realizes the real reason why Grandmaster sent Kang Hyuk here. It's because its mindset isn't fixed and he thinks out of the box. He himself wonders why he has been so obsessed with just the form of the martial art and the instruction in the manual. The next day, Kang Hyuk makes his way over to the temple expecting to train with Haigul, but when he arrives he finds the place completely empty with nobody around at all. He looks around in surprise, trying to figure out where everyone has gone, and then picks up on the sound of voices coming from somewhere on the other side. When he follows the sound and heads over to investigate, he finds a crane sitting there with a whole group of monks gathered around it, all of them relaxed and clearly enjoying themselves in its company. To his surprise, he also finds that the monks are striking crane poses right there in front of the actual bird, though the moment they notice Kang Hyuk standing there watching them, they immediately get startled and scared at having been caught. Starting from that day, Kang Hyuk dedicates the next 15 days entirely in spending time with the crane, and during that stretch the masters teach and work through all of the movements of the crane and the crane strike technique together with Muyul, going over every detail carefully and repeatedly. However, as things progress it becomes clear that Muyul's version of the crane strike is noticeably and significantly different from the way either Haigul or Byeob Hyun performs the same technique, setting itself apart in ways that are hard to ignore. Before long, Kang Hyuk comes to the conclusion that pushing Muyul's training any further in this direction would be completely pointless and without any real value, because when he thinks back to what he set out to learn from the very beginning, he realizes that the crane strike itself was never actually the thing he was truly after. It's been 1 month since Kang Hyuk started on Grandpa's treatment, and he thinks about himself. Meanwhile, the monks talks about how Kang Hyuk is really doing his best for the treatments, but he wonder when Grandmaster Hyun Guang will recover. One of the older monks tells the massive one that he himself said he would make Kang Hyuk pay if his treatment doesn't show any results in a month. The guy says that it was him telling him to work hard in a roundabout manner. Later, Kang Hyuk finally starts adjusting the Grandmaster's back since he did his legs yesterday. The Grandmaster can now feel even better than today because he is only moving his body a bit. The monk standing nearby is shocked to see the Grandmaster's health improving and he thinks that it's something that's out of the ordinary for him. The monk then runs back to the room near the abbot's quarters to inform others about Kang Hyuk's treatment working. The old man then says that effects of the treatment he has helped in. One of the massive built monks says that he was doubtful when they used their powers with theories that they never heard of before, but it would be really effective. As soon as visible improvement began showing up in the Grandmaster's condition, the level of trust that the older monks had in Kang Hyuk shot up very quickly, but even with all of that positive progress, Kang Hyuk himself was far from satisfied with where things stood and felt like there was still a lot more that needed to be done. Not long after, Kang Hyuk makes his way over to the monks' quarters and gathers all of them together because he has something important that he needs to bring to their attention regarding the Grandmaster's treatment and where things currently stand. Kang Hyuk tells them all that the Grandmaster is doing all right for the time being, but that there is a serious problem standing in the way of the next step forward in his recovery. He goes on to explain that while the other aspects of the treatment have been moving in the right direction, the cartilage in the Grandmaster's joints is a completely different and much more complicated story, as it has deteriorated very badly over the years due to old age and is currently in a very poor and concerning state. He tells them plainly that the only real solution available to address this problem is for the Grandmaster to start eating meat, since consuming the right nutrition is absolutely necessary in order for the body to build up the muscles needed to support and protect those deteriorating joints, and he acknowledges that this remains a controversial topic even in the modern age where far more is known about the body and its needs. Despite all of that reasoning, however, the act of eating meat is something that goes completely against the beliefs and rules of the temple and would never under normal circumstances be permitted or allowed. Kang Hyuk thinks to himself as he stands there that if he is not able to successfully persuade the monks in front of him and get them to agree, then the Grandmaster's life might genuinely be at risk. After that, the old monk reveals that there are actually ways for Grandmaster Hyunguang to go ahead and eat meat without technically breaking the rules and laws that govern life within the Shaolin Temple. He explains that the Grandmaster would be permitted to eat meat as long as he is willing to receive the appropriate punishment for doing so afterward. Kang Hyuk immediately jumps in and asks about the details of the punishment, making it clear right away that he wants to step up and take on whatever punishment the Grandmaster would have to face in his place. The old monk then reveals that the punishment in question involves facing the walls in isolation for an entire month, and he pointedly reminds Kang Hyuk that he has already gone through that same type of punishment before for 7 days and asks whether he is truly willing to accept it again, even though this time around it is significantly longer and far more demanding than what he experienced before. Kang Hyuk does not hesitate for even a moment and says that he will gladly and willingly accept the punishment without any complaint, which catches everyone present completely off guard and leaves them visibly surprised by his readiness. The next day over at Hyunguang's abode, the old monk pays the Grandmaster a visit and sits down to tell him that the reason he ended up stepping into the role of abbot in the first place was because the Grandmaster suffered his injury and was no longer able to carry out his duties. He goes on to admit honestly that with his own limited capacity and abilities, the most he was ever truly able to do was observe and maintain tradition, and that while the Shaolin Temple has managed to hold onto its reputation as one of the great martial groups of the world, it has lost the prestigious title of being the strongest in the world that it once held. Due to his own incompetency and failures that piled up over the years, the Shaolin Temple has slowly but surely lost the greatness and glory that it once carried so proudly for generations. The old man then speaks up and says that he genuinely believes that Kang Hyuk will be the one to bring along the wind of a positive and meaningful change, and that he would very much like to continue placing his trust in Kang Hyuk going forward. The food that Kang Hyuk ended up bringing back turned out to be meat without any question about it. After taking a moment to pray over the food, the Grandmaster sat down and ate meat for the very first time in his entire life, crossing a line he had never crossed before. Following that, Kang Hyuk spent 7 full days walking Biob through every step and detail of the treatment process so that he would be able to handle it properly on his own. Since the electricity and heat treatment portions were already being taken care of by Hyungong and Hai Dam, Kang Hyuk did not have to carry the burden of worrying about those parts of the process. Now, as part of the punishment handed down to him, Kang Hyuk is required to spend a set period of time inside the cave as consequence for what happened. As it turns out, Hyun Chun is also there in the cave alongside Kang Hyuk, having made the personal decision to accept the same punishment and go through it together with him. The two of them settle down inside the cave and sit together in meditation, each of them letting their minds wander through all sorts of thoughts and reflections during that quiet time. After that stretch comes to an end, Kang Hyuk gets back into the thick of things and continues fighting, and the two of them carry on working side by side together as they push forward. That night, a monk arrives and brings water and grain balls for both of them to eat, and it is in that moment that Kang Hyuk finally comes to the realization that he had been so completely absorbed and lost in his training that he never even noticed a martial master whose presence he could not detect at all had come and was right there with him. Kang Hyuk then makes the decision to head outside, and the master sitting beside him assumes that Kang Hyuk has simply grown restless from being cooped up in the cave for so long and is heading out because he wants to get back to training. Hyun Chun thought that Kang Hyuk is heading out to train, but in reality he just wants to go get some protein. On the other side of things, the Grandmaster's condition has improved so dramatically and come so far that he has actually started getting up and training on his own without anyone needing to push or assist him. The Grandmaster has begun putting on muscle across various parts of his body, and thanks to the strength that those developing muscles are giving him, he has reached the point where he is now able to move around on his own without needing to rely on Biob Jeon's support to get by. The Grandmaster then steps out of his room and takes a quiet moment to himself, letting his mind drift back to his past and reflecting on everything he went through and all the suffering he endured alongside the people who were close to him during those difficult times. He thinks to himself that the Grandmaster had always possessed an exceptional and deep understanding of the world around him, and that his grasp of both martial arts and the sacred scriptures went far beyond what most people could ever hope to reach in a lifetime. The Grandmaster then lowers himself down onto the ground and settles into a state of deep meditation, and one of the other monks nearby suddenly picks up on something unusual coming from the Grandmaster's energy and immediately breaks into a run toward him out of concern. That monk thinks to himself that something is definitely not right with the energy he is sensing and that whatever is happening is far from normal. Not long after, the rain that had been falling gradually comes to a stop, and as the air clears, everyone present is able to look up and witness the Grandmaster's energy rising and shooting upward toward the sky in a brilliant and breathtaking display. Even the monks who have not yet developed a strong or reliable ability to sense energy could feel it clearly, because the energy radiating outward was so intensely bright that it was almost painful to take in, and at the same time it carried a warmth and a sense of deep mercy and compassion that washed over everyone who felt it. Shortly after, one of the monks makes his way to the cave where Kanghyuk and the older men have been carrying out their punishment, and delivers the message that the Grandmaster himself has given the order for their punishment to be brought to an end immediately. When Kanghyuk and the old man finally make their way back to the temple, they are immediately caught off guard and surprised to find a spread of fancy and elaborate dishes laid out on the table waiting for them. Kanghyuk is shocked when he looks over and sees the Grandmaster sitting there eating all of that meat, and the Grandmaster simply looks back at him and tells him calmly that he is doing nothing more than strengthening his body and giving it what it needs. The Grandmaster goes on to say that he has not been doing all that much lately in terms of activity, but that the effects of the meat consumption are already making themselves visible and clear in the way his body is responding. Because of that, he says that as far as he is concerned, Kanghyuk and the old man did absolutely nothing wrong in what they did, and that it was he himself who put in the request for their return back to the temple. After hearing all of that, Kanghyuk takes in everything that had gone on while he was away and decides to let go of trying to make sense of it all for the time being and just move forward. A little later, another monk comes to find Kanghyuk and lets him know that the equipment he had previously requested from the hall leader has been brought in and delivered, and that from this point on he now has a proper space available where he can carry out his strength training. When Kanghyuk steps into the room and takes a look around, he is surprised to find that everyone is already in there and actively working out with the gym equipment. He thinks to himself that while it is not quite up to the level of the gym he was used to back in his previous life, he is still genuinely glad to have a place where he can put his muscles to work with iron and sweat and continue building his body the way he wants to. Gung and his friend then ask him about how to use this equipment and Kanghyuk starts teaching them. First of all, they have a rubber wheel available, so Kanghyuk teaches them how to properly lift it up and work with it, explaining that since it weighs in at around 150 kilograms, training with it the right way will allow them to work and develop their entire body all at once. Gung wastes absolutely no time and jumps straight into training with it right away, throwing himself into it with full energy and commitment. Meanwhile, Muyul decides to show Kanghyuk what he is working with by launching himself around the pull-up bar and demonstrating his insane and almost unbelievable level of flexibility as he moves around it. Watching him go, Kanghyuk thinks to himself that the way Muyul is moving so freely and effortlessly around the bar looks exactly like some kind of monkey movement, completely natural and unrestricted in a way that most people could never replicate. Beyond the bars and the rubber wheel, there is actually plenty of other equipment available for them to work with as well, and what sets this new equipment apart is that most of it is the kind of thing that would primarily be found and used in CrossFit style training rather than in a traditional gym setting. Kanghyuk also holds firmly to the belief that if he were to just train without any real plan or care behind it, he would end up turning into nothing more than a muscle head, and that kind of lopsided development would actually get in the way of and hold back his martial arts rather than help it. What he needs to focus on instead is finding the right balance, continuing to build up his strength while at the same time maintaining the level of muscle and flexibility that he has been carefully working to develop up until now. Through a wide range of various training sessions, Kanghyuk has managed to stabilize his inner energy to a noticeably greater degree than he was able to before. After receiving the letter from Hyun Gwang, he makes his way toward his next training location, which turns out to be the Demon Extermination Squad. Kanghyuk has approached and taken every single round of training he has gone through up until now with complete seriousness and full commitment, but for some reason he cannot quite put his finger on. He finds himself feeling a little more nervous than usual about what this particular training is going to involve. Kanghyuk thinks to himself that the person who is going to be overseeing and running this training is Hai Guan, the leader of the Demon Extermination Squad, and that even back during the entrance test he could already tell just from watching him that Hai Guan was no ordinary person by any stretch of the imagination. Inside the training area, Guan is already in the middle of a session, taking on all of the students at the same time completely by himself. Even against that many people coming at him at once, he handles all of them without any real trouble, and when Mu Kyung charges at him with everything he has, Guan simply and effortlessly puts him down on the ground without breaking a sweat. Guan then looks down at him and tells him plainly that he has once again failed to get his madness under control the way he needs to. Just then, Kanghyuk walks in and presents the letter he is carrying, and the moment Guan lays eyes on his face he bursts out laughing without holding anything back. Guan also brings up the fact that he heard Kang Hyuk had been locked away in the cave previously and was supposed to still be serving out his punishment, yet here he is standing right in front of him instead. Guan then tells Kang Hyuk that the letter he received states clearly that he is permitted to train Kang Hyuk in his own way, and that the kind of training he has in mind is sparring that comes as close to a real fight as it possibly can. Guan goes on to explain that the group he belongs to exists for one purpose and one purpose only, which is to deal with evil and wicked individuals who show absolutely no remorse for what they do, and that the demons they face fight with the full intention of killing them, so if they do not approach every single fight with complete seriousness and full commitment, they are going to end up paying for it dearly. Without wasting even a second, Guan launches himself straight at Kang Hyuk, and no matter what Kang Hyuk attempts to do or tries to throw back at him, he simply cannot find a way to hold his own or stand any real chance against him. In the middle of the sparring session, Guan finds his eyes drifting to Kang Hyuk's hair and thinks to himself that the way it looks is absolutely ridiculous every single time he glances at it, and he genuinely cannot wrap his head around the fact that the discipline court leader actually looked at that and gave it the green light. After 4 grueling hours the training session finally comes to an end, and by that point Kang Hyuk is completely and utterly drained with nothing left in the tank. Afterward, Kang Hyuk pulls Mu Kyung aside and tells him what he needs to do, which is to make sure he lands a solid and proper punch on him the moment he comes charging in. Mu Kyung thinks to himself that there is simply no way something like that is going to work on someone as overwhelmingly strong and experienced as Guan. Just then, the Grandmaster suddenly appears and walks in entirely on his own 2 feet, which immediately catches Guan completely off guard and leaves him stunned and speechless at the sight of it. Without a moment of hesitation, Guan takes off running straight toward him to pay his respects, something that those who know him would recognize as completely out of character since he had never done anything like that in the past. Going back a little earlier, the Grandmaster had taken a moment to tell Kang Hyuk that he does not think of him as a bad person at all, explaining that Kang Hyuk used to follow him around everywhere he went, and that while he is not trying to make himself sound impressive or brag about his past, he mentioned that there was a time when he had saved Kang Hyuk's life. Watching Guan sprint toward the Grandmaster the way he is, Kang Hyuk finds the whole scene pulling up a memory from his own childhood, reminding him of the times he used to run full speed toward his own grandfather, and how his excitement would get the better of him and he would end up tripping and falling down before he even got there. Snapping back to the present, both Kang Hyuk and Mu Kyung launch themselves at Guan together and come at him with their special techniques, but this time around Guan reads everything coming and manages to block both of them cleanly. Guan then grabs both of their heads and smashes them on the ground. Guan then sits with the Grandmaster, who thinks that he is being too harsh on the kids. Guan says that if he goes easy on them, then things might get dangerous for them later, and if he is not this harsh, they will become relaxed and get lazy. He also makes it clear that none of them have any way of knowing exactly when war is going to come knocking at their door, but that regardless of when that day arrives, they need to make absolutely sure that every single one of them is fully prepared and ready for battle when it does. In a flashback, Guan is seen pushing himself through incredibly hard and grueling training with the sole purpose of being useful and capable enough to make a real difference when the time came, but then the day that the demonic cult launched their invasion finally arrived without warning. During that devastating event, the Grandmaster threw himself into the chaos and managed to save countless people from certain death, and Guan himself turned out to be the very last person the Grandmaster saved before the effort completely destroyed his energy core and left him crippled and broken beyond repair. In that moment, standing there after being saved, Guan made a solemn and burning promise to himself that he would hunt down and kill every single demon responsible, and from that point forward he never stopped pushing ahead until he had fully committed himself to walking the path of demon extermination as his life's sole purpose. Then in a surprising turn, the old man turns to Guan and casually asks him for a drink, which catches Guan completely off guard and leaves him stunned and visibly taken aback by the request. Meanwhile, out in the yard, Kang Hyuk and Mu Kyung continue going at each other in a back-and-forth fight while Guan and the Grandmaster sit together nearby, relaxed and unbothered, leisurely pouring each other glasses of juice as if nothing else in the world is going on around them. Once they finish fighting and take a moment to catch their breath, both of them come to the conclusion that each one of them has gotten noticeably and genuinely stronger than they were before. Kang Hyuk then turns his attention to the administration hall leader and picks up right away on the fact that the expression on his face is far from good, and it does not take long to find out that the reason behind it is that the Shaolin Temple is currently caught up in some serious financial difficulty. The 1,000-year-old Shaolin Temple, one of the most well-known and reputable great martial groups in existence and recognized far and wide as the North Star of Mount Tai, had always lived a life that was deliberately cut off and separated from the secular world outside its walls, with all of their time and energy devoted entirely to meditation and training. However, no matter how completely they cut themselves off from the outside world and everything that comes with it, there is simply no getting around the basic necessities of food, clothing, and shelter, and those things all come at a cost that cannot be ignored. Some of the Shaolin monks have started to quietly place the blame for their current financial troubles on Kang Hyuk himself, pointing to the chain of events that started from the moment he stepped in and saved Mu Kyung, who had been on the receiving end of relentless bullying from some of the outer sect disciples. Following that incident, the Shaolin Temple took action and handed out punishments to those who had been found most responsible for what was done wrong. The clique that bullied Mu Kyung had their energy core destroyed and could no longer learn martial arts. Since the Seobul escort establishment got shut down, the other outer sect groups began to express concern over this. Soon, the visitors arrive at the temple and Kang Hyuk thinks that it's not hard to receive guests. Kang Hyuk suddenly picks up on a sound coming from somewhere below and heads down to check out what it is, and that is when he spots an old lady slowly making her way toward the temple on foot. Without thinking twice, Kang Hyuk decides to step in and carry her the rest of the way, and the reason he treats elderly people with such genuine care and respect goes back to the fact that his grandparents were the ones who stepped up and filled the role of his parents for him from the time he was very young. At the same time, somewhere else entirely, one of the 5 largest and most powerful merchants in the entire world, a man named Ryu Jigwang, is sitting and seething with fury as he goes over some reports that have been brought to his attention. Just then, his mother walks into the room and it quickly becomes clear that she is none other than the very same old lady that Kang Hyuk helped and carried to the temple earlier. She tells her son excitedly that she went and received treatment at the Shaolin Temple earlier that day, and that thanks to a young man there who worked on her with a massage, she is feeling better than she has in a long time. Her son looks her over with surprise written all over his face as he notices that she genuinely does look better than before, and that the chronic trembling that had been plaguing her leg for so long has actually died down and lessened noticeably. Right then and there, he makes up his mind that he is going to accompany her and make the trip to the Shaolin Temple himself the very next day to see things for himself. The next day, Kang Hyuk introduces himself as a third-generation disciple but tells them to just call him Kang Hyuk. The old lady thanks him warmly and says he is adorable. Her son Ryu asks if Kang Hyuk was the one who treated his mother. Kang Hyuk says it was nothing. The lady smiles and tells him she came back to pray and get another massage. She jokes that she would introduce him to her granddaughter if he were not a monk. Kang Hyuk tells her to bring the girl next time anyway. Ryu watches the two of them and quietly notes that even his own grandchildren are not this warm with him. His mother says she really will bring her. Kang Hyuk feels genuinely happy seeing the old lady smile. He then turns his attention to Ryu and recognizes him as the head of the merchant group. Right now they are just a trading organization, but Kang Hyuk remembers from the novel that the Celestial Flow group later gets involved in drug dealing and human trafficking. They were never official allies of the villain, but there was clearly some kind of arrangement between them. Kang Hyuk decides they have not gone down that path yet, and that the best way to find out how it happens is to get closer to them. Ryu catches Kang Hyuk staring and asks if there is something on his face. Kang Hyuk quickly shakes his head. Then he notices the man rubbing his own back and comments that he must spend a lot of time sitting. Ryu looks surprised and asks how he could tell. He confirms that he reads constantly while seated and has not exercised in a long time. Kang Hyuk explains that slightly curved hips and a rounded back are common in people who work at a desk. Since he is already here, Kang Hyuk suggests he take the chance to get some treatment alongside his mother. Ryu agrees, curious to see what the boy can actually do. They all head over to the Grandmaster's residence together. The Master and Beep Gang are surprised to see guests at this hour. Kang Hyuk arrives with the old lady and her son and explains they came for treatment. Beep Gang then asks him if it's alright to treat everyone at the same time, and the grandmother replies that it's a good thing. Kang Hyuk divides things up as he will handle the Master and the lady, while the Beep Gang takes care of Ryu. Beep Gang shows Ryu the forelimb extension technique and walks him through it. Kang Hyuk tells the Master that today's treatment will be on the muscle strengthening device. The Grandmaster gets into position, places one foot on the back pedal, grips the front handle, and pushes back. He says that even though it is his first time using it, he can already feel something working. Kang Hyuk tells him to let him know when his legs get tired so they can switch positions. He then turns to the old lady and invites her to try the spinal correction chair. He helps her sit down and asks her to lean back into the hollow section. She winces slightly and says that even just lying down seems to hurt these days. While the Grandmaster keeps exercising, Kang Hyuk asks how she is feeling. She tells him she trusts he would never make her do anything that would hurt her. The Grandmaster mentions that he has been receiving treatment from Kang Hyuk for some time now. The old lady looks at the Master, confused, and says he looks perfectly healthy to her. The Master explains calmly that he was in far worse shape before. The old lady concludes that Kang Hyuk truly has a golden touch. Beep Gang asks Ryu how the forelimb extension technique felt. The man says it was very good. He explains that it hurt quite a bit at first but the pain faded and left him feeling loose and relaxed. He thanked the Beep Gang sincerely. Beep Gang looks relieved that it went well, and then admits honestly that it was actually his first time using the technique on another person. The old lady is visibly impressed and says she now understands that the Grandmaster is no ordinary man. Ryu quietly steps closer to the Beep Gang and asks if that man's name is really the Grandmaster. He watches the techniques and realizes no average martial artist could produce anything like that. 30 years ago, the Grandmaster was the monk who defeated the demonic cult that attacked and tried to destroy the temple as the one known as the greatest under the heavens. Ryu can barely believe the man sitting in front of him is that same legendary divine monk of Shaolin. He had heard rumors that the master was left incapacitated after that battle, and yet here he is, recovering. Ryu looks at everything around him and quietly concludes that the forelimb extension technique must have been what brought him back. As evening comes, the old lady thanks Kanghyuk again. The Grandmaster applies some treatment to her arm and she says the sensation is warm and pleasant. Later that night, Kanghyuk walks Ryu out. Before leaving, the man asks for a moment. He says he will come back early the next morning and asks to be taken to the administrative hall. He wants to talk, and the matter involves Kanghyuk directly. Kanghyuk agrees to arrange it but asks what it is about. Ryu says he will explain tomorrow and says good night. Kanghyuk watches him go, wondering what he is planning. The next morning, Kanghyuk walks Ryu to Shaolin's administrative hall. The head of the hall, Hyeonjeong, stares at the visitor and asks him to repeat what he just said. Ryu says it clearly that he is proposing that the Celestial Flow Merchant Group and monk Kanghyuk open a clinic together. Ryu decides to give them 100 gold coins for his mother's treatment expenses and offers some amount for a year's worth of food expenses to their Shaolin. Ryu then says that he regrets not offering an even larger amount considering that the treatment techniques used showed improvement in an incurable disease that even renowned physicians couldn't treat. However, the old man tells him to elaborate more about opening a clinic with Kanghyuk. Ryu explains that Kanghyuk's treatment method is something new, so there are many patients in this world like Grandmaster and his mother who cannot be cured with conventional treatments. So, he wishes to open a clinic utilizing Kanghyuk's skills for those patients. It turns out, Ryu possesses a vast network because he is a merchant leader, and despite having so much money the diseases are incurable. So, if Kanghyuk's treatment methods were to be introduced and made available to people of wealth and influence, the kind of profits that could come from it would be absolutely tremendous and far-reaching. Deep down, Kanghyuk finds himself genuinely puzzled and wondering why the Shaolin monks are so resistant and flat-out refusing the idea even when they are sitting in the middle of a serious financial crisis with no money to speak of. Kanghyuk then puts forward a suggestion, proposing that they should open up the treatment to both the poor and the wealthy without drawing any distinction between the two groups or turning anyone away based on what they have. He also lays out the idea that they should split things up into two separate facilities, where one would be completely open and free of charge for those who cannot afford to pay, while the other would be set up specifically to cater to wealthy clients who are able and willing to pay well for the service. Kanghyuk keeps going and walks them through the entire business plan in detail, which ends up making the Shaolin monks furious as they listen, with one of them demanding to know how a disciple of Shaolin could even think about standing there and talking about turning something like this into a means of making money. Despite all of the pushback and resistance he faces throughout the conversation, Kanghyuk holds his ground and keeps making his case until he eventually manages to bring the Shaolin monk around to his way of thinking. He also adds that in the end everyone in the room, including the Grandmaster himself, comes to an agreement and gives their approval to move forward with what Kanghyuk has proposed. How long do you think it will take for Kanghyuk to fully master the Shaolin 5 hand strikes and earn the recognition he deserves? Comment, Kanghyuk, if you'd like a part 2 of this series. Make sure to like and subscribe the channel for more sports manhwa recaps.